It is weird. Like I heard people talking about it recently again about like those big boys being on their feet like around that Thanksgiving. And we always talked about when we were kids, like that's when we would really hunt Thanksgiving break with Dad. And that's like when we always saw the best deer. Thank you for joining us for the second episode of the Venari Effect podcast. We've had some groundbreaking news happen since the first episode. Easton has gone to the other side.
I started a drone deer recovery service. Yeah, since we dropped the first one, we had some people come forward with some earth-shattering information, I guess, or kind of swayed my opinion. I was informed that this technology, just like any other, can be abused. And so essentially it's just all equally the same. And so I'm sold on it.
Okay. All right. Yeah, you had it out beforehand, trying to find deer.
Was it one of those little like DJI pocket drones?
Oh yeah. Yeah, you can get it anywhere. Yep, the thick stuff.
In all seriousness, if you did catch the first one, we appreciate you guys watching it. Know that it has the potential to be a little bit controversial. We're kind of in uncharted waters right now with the whole drone thing. So if you listen to it, we appreciate it. And as we mentioned in it, feel free to drop us a comment or, leave your opinion or your thoughts. They're welcomed by us. We won't think any differently of you. So,
and if you haven't seen it, it'll be up at the top of the screen here. You can click that link and view it for yourself.
Good deal. So this podcast will be a little bit more of a light note, I guess you could say. We're going to talk about Jake and Easton's buck from this season, and just Jake and Easton's buck because I don't have a buck. So
the turns have tabled.
Yeah, I guess I was due. So it's not over yet, though. If we can find one to hunt, we'll go get after it. But just going to kind of break down the hunts. I'll kind of run through, ask you guys some questions maybe. So late November, early December was pretty stinking good for you guys.
Yeah, it was hot. That was best time of the year for this season, at least it seemed like.
Yeah, normally I'm an October guy, but take them when you can get them.
Yeah,
it is weird. Like I heard people talking about it recently again about like those big boys being on their feet like around that Thanksgiving, and we always talked about when we were kids, like that's when we would really hunt Thanksgiving break with Dad. And that's like when we always saw the best deer.
We finally had a break from wrestling and we were off school and weren't busy with football or whatever else was going on. Yeah, we had some of our best hunts at that time frame as kids. I
think there's something too that like, the amount of does or whatever that are in estrus or have been in estrus and now, out of estrus or been bred or however you want to say it is just dwindled and they're just really trying to find those last.
So they're on the move. We saw a ton of chasing during that time frame too. I remember it was 2 years in a row sitting the same stand the same weekend. It was like December 14th, 15th, or 16th, and seeing bucks, dog, and does like it was the middle of November. So I think one thing that contributes to that too is just it depends on when the does that are on your property come into heat. Some of those does are early, and so you're going to get a flurry of activity in early October, late October, early November. You can have a property where you have does that their cycle, their schedule is later, and so then the bucks are going to be there later in November. So.
Well, and they call it the second rut or whatever is how some people refer to it, but essentially does that may have been bred the first go around but didn't come back into heat. And I know during my little 3-day stint of hunting, I definitely saw some bucks chasing and grunting and basically everything you'd expect to see in early November.
Same for me. I saw, at least for mature bucks, it was the best rutting activity I saw, and it was last day in November, basically.
I think it was, wasn't it?
It was the 29th.
No, it was the first.
No, it was the first.
That's right. That's
the 28th.
That's right. So yeah, let's just dive in, I guess, then too. So you mentioned a little bit about seeing some better rutting activity. We'll might as well start with yours, Jake, and then go to Easton's because his was second, and it was freaking insane. I was just gonna say some bucks were rutting, others were
not.
We're not. So one of the biggest things I figured we would talk about that was similar between both you guys was the implementation of your saddles. Yours, especially because I don't know, have you hunted with a gun out of your saddle up until this year?
No.
Was that harder or easy? To me, I feel like that'd be tough. Just
honestly, the series of events that happened leading up to, like I'm talking like because this, you'll see when we put the film together, but the 2 minutes before I actually shot was just complete chaos. And so I didn't really have time to think about it. I was free. You're hanging off the tree in your saddle, and you're facing the direction you expect the deer to come from. And of course, Murphy's Law, if it can go wrong, it will go wrong. So he came behind me downwind. So I swung in my saddle and turned and just freehanded it at like 60 yards.
So I guess if you were saddle hunting with a gun and you had your shot out in front of you, that'd be great with the tree. Just be able to just rest right against the tree.
That's what I was anticipating happening.
Right.
Yeah.
Huh.
So
interesting. Yeah, that's cool.
The ability to maneuver. Before we talk about the deer at all, that the day that I hunted, it was like a high of 22 degrees and it was blowing like 20 miles an hour. It was snowing in my face all day because I was facing the direction the wind was coming from, and I sat all day. That was the first time I'd ever done that. And if I had been in his tree stand, I don't think I would have been able to do it because I couldn't have shifted positions to get comfortable.
Yeah.
I was able to stand on one leg and keep my weight off of the other one to warm my toes up a little bit by moving them, and there's no way you can do that in a tree stand.
You don't, and I certainly do not have the knee pads. I know that kind of creates a whole new window of opportunity to find different positions to just kind of relax your legs a little bit. I know some guys say that's incredibly comfortable.
I have a set of knee pads, and when I first started hunting out of the saddle, I wore those things, but they made me sweat so bad. So I was like, leave them there. I don't need to get that, especially when it's cold. I'm not taking knee pads out because they're cinched down around your leg and tighter. And walking into this setup or whatever, I was going to sweat my butt off. So I decided leave that at home.
Positions and knee pads and love swings.
Sure. Yeah. Gotta love them. I love them.
They definitely, absolutely have their place. Just listen to you describe what you were able to do in that tree with your saddle. Like, actually, I'm going to save what I was going to say because I know you're going to talk a lot about it with yours. But yeah, there's definitely a time and place for those. You kind of talked about something I was going to bring up is key to success, I think, for your hunt. I was going to ask you what you thought. Like, to me, there's like 2 or 3 things that really stood out and aligned and kind of came together for your hunt. 2 of which you already brought up was we have so much trouble with swirling winds back in there. But it was so windy that day that I think it stayed true the whole day. You know what I mean? Like usually when it's 5 to 8 mile an hour winds, it swirls on us.
Even in 20 mile an hour winds, I could feel it shifting every once in a while because it was forecasted to be a straight west wind. And every once in a while, I could feel it kick to the north hard, like northwest. And every once in a while, I could feel it kick hard to the south, but it never seemed to swirl. I was constantly dropping milkweed all day long to check that stuff. And though the direction changed, it was still always blowing westerly away from where I thought the deer would come. So that was something else that was interesting too. The buck that I ended up shooting walked directly downwind of me, but never smelled me once. There were 4 deer back there, and not a single one of them smelled me. And I think it's because the wind was blowing so fast, and I was high enough above them that my scent just drifted right over top of them. They were down a slight grade. I think that made a huge difference too.
Or he was with the doe, right? Which we'll probably get into.
Well, he wasn't with the doe. He was there to take her for sure.
Okay. I just thought maybe too that buck we saw a few days before that was with that doe, like locked down, and he didn't care about anything. Directly downwind, saw us, stayed right on her. So.
But we also know that in that particular spot, though the wind might be forecasted, I think it was supposed to be an east wind that day.
Yeah.
Is that right?
Mm-hmm.
And that was blowing directly where he came from, but there's a river, and that water seems to take all the air. It sucks all the air out of that spot when there's no wind. So I mean, dropping milkweed every once in a while would have east in it, but it was pretty much blowing southwest because it was sucking right down to that water.
Yeah, that's a good point. Definitely don't have that where you killed yours, but I guess let's start from the top. So I would have been hunting with Jake. I was off work actually, but I was sicker than a dog. So Jake went in solo, and you said that was your first all-day sit, right?
It's the first time I've ever actually sat in the tree all day long. Yeah.
Have you ever done? I never have once.
No, I've talked about it,
Yeah.
but every time push comes to shove,
I wouldn't advise it when it's 20 degrees outside.
Yeah, I've sat and like gone to the truck and like ate a sandwich and got right back in, or like even
I've never
I think
even done that.
We've stayed in the woods, but like shifted at lunch to a new tree. But yeah, I don't think I've ever sat in the same spot.
I did
dark to dark.
I did shift trees once. I got up in a tree and thought that I was too far away from where all the activity was going to be, so I shifted and moved closer. I think I moved like 40 or 50 yards closer.
Would you have got a shot at him with a gun still if you would have stayed where you were originally?
Probably.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. That's interesting because from if you would have been bow hunting from that standpoint, you absolutely wouldn't have.
No.
Yeah.
Even with a shotgun, I would have been shooting. I mean, it would have been tight because it would have been through. The original tree I was on the opposite side of the little creek bottom, so I would have been shooting through all the vines and brush that grows. It doesn't grow tall because it's down in that creek bottom, but I've been shooting through all of that stuff to where he came from. So with a shotgun, you can probably pull that off to a certain degree, but definitely not with a bow.
Yeah. Yeah, I gotcha. Which is ironic though, because you could have shot him with a bow, right?
I could have. He was at like 5 or 6 yards. I was pinned.
Can you imagine having your target buck at 5 yards and that's the first time you see him?
Well, and this is the difficult part because I had a feeling that it was him, but I couldn't see him because there were other deer that I was paying attention to, and I thought they were going to get downwind, so I've got to make sure that I don't move because if they do smell me, I don't want them to see me either and just blow the whole thing out. So I'm turned with my back against the tree watching these deer over here, and I can hear another deer coming from my left, but I couldn't move to look until eventually, and again, I didn't have all my cameras rolling at this point because I was caught off guard in the tree. So by the time I get to where I can pull my hood back and see that it's that buck down in the corner of my peripheral vision, I had just enough time to turn and grab my gun and crack on that 360 GoPro, and that was basically all I had.
Yeah.
So
yeah, which at that point, we're diehard video guys, but when you got your target deer there, I think we all probably take that opportunity over getting it on video.
Like you said, you had the day off work, and had we been hunting together, we probably both would have been in tree stands. We probably never would have made the move to that spot. And I mean, who knows what would have happened differently.
Yeah, I know. I wonder that was one of the other keys to success I was going to ask you about. If you had left and had to go back in midday, if it still would have played out the way it did. And I think it could have, but there's so many deer holding tight to that area. You also could have, flushed one out the wrong way, and who knows? That's why I thought you sitting all day potentially was a major, major key.
Yeah, I mean, you talk about first time in all the time. That was basically what this was. We had never hunted in that spot before, had historical data from years prior that this deer in particular would move into that area and use a couple of these different trails. You had a rope scrape that he was on.
It was actually a
year,
year ago to the date you killed him.
It was an hour after I shot him, or
Yep.
something like that. Hour before I shot him,
Yep.
a year ago on the same date. So,
What were you gonna say, Easton?
Is that the rotten rope scrape?
Dude, it's nasty.
I love it.
Yeah, what does Don recommend?
Is it
hemp rope?
Manila or hemp?
I think it's Manila. It's just from TSC, and that one rotted really bad. It's like black.
Yeah.
But I haven't had a camera on it this season, really. Oh, well, I guess I did over the summer, and they were still hitting it.
I was gonna
but
say you should be able to tell
yeah.
regardless.
It's probably like killing deer or something. It
could
probably, got black mold on it or something. That'd
Yeah.
be my luck. But yeah, he was hitting that a bunch last year. Which is, that's just, I don't know who coined that. I think Don Higgins has talked about same time, same place. Mark Drury definitely has. There is something to that for sure.
If you pay attention to it, like, it doesn't take long to figure it out either. I mean, we were just, before we started here, we were talking about a buck that you've had pictures of on a property you have for 2 years now, and he changed a little bit from last year to this year, but if you start to look at historical trail cam data, it's, pretty much undeniable.
yeah.
How is that? They don't know what day it is, just their internal clock. Like,
Well, but
it's
I don't know
wild.
that you would get that with a young buck. I think it's the mature deer. They just get set in their ways. Like you look at some of the older generation of humans, they get set in their ways. I think deer do the same thing.
I'd say what's particularly cool about that deer specifically is it's not like you have him, for the month of October and then he goes away. This is a deer that shows up for a day.
Yeah,
or
single day.
Two. I don't know what last year was, but like
One
a day.
I had 3 pictures of him. I had one sequence of 3 pictures.
And that's sweet. That is
Yeah.
really cool. And those are the ones that stand out the most. Like, shoot, that's that same deer. Like,
Yep.
if he was showing up for a whole month at a time, you may not put 2 and 2 together, even after a couple years of history. But
Yeah.
that's one that sticks out like a sore thumb.
Yeah. That's really cool if you can kill one like on purpose because of that. Like, I know this week he's going to be in here. Like, because I think some people like take it too far and think you mean like they're going to be like on that rope scrape. It's like they're just going to be in the area.
Right.
Because last year, the buck you ended up shooting this year, he was in the food plot a lot. And I don't
Yeah.
think I had a single picture of him in there this year. But where you killed him was,
No, but
200
where-
yards from there. Not even.
The rope scrape 60 yards, and it's on the same trail, the exact
Yeah.
same trail that he used, which is not the one I anticipated him to use. But I mean, he basically did exactly the same thing 1 year later.
Yep. So he got around behind you. You're scrambling in the tree. You're trying to figure out how the heck I'm going to get a crack off at this guy. A crack off? A shot off at this guy. I don't know what I was trying to say.
Get a crack at
a
this
crack
deer?
at, I think, yeah. As soon as I said it, I was like, what the? It's been a long day, long week. And I didn't realize until I had gone in there blood trailing with you. It is, I don't know what those trees are. They're some locust trees. I don't
There's
know.
some locusts. There's some black walnut is notoriously slow growing. There's tons of that stuff in there too. So it's just scrub trees that are like 4 or 5, maybe 8 to 10 inches in diameter. They're 30, 40 feet tall, and they haven't seemed to grow a whole lot. It's super high stem count.
Yeah. Because I just remember when you called me and said you got a shot off at him, and then when you describe how he reacts, I remember thinking like, how you got a gun? How did you not get another shot? Until I got in there blood trailing with you, and I'm like, oh, there's no way. I don't know how you shot him to begin with. So he gets to like 60, right? And you're like, here's my chance.
Yeah, well, I mean, we had sighted in those shotguns. I knew 20 gauge shotgun between 40 and 80 yards really isn't going to change a whole lot. And if you get a slug, the 45 caliber slug into that chest cavity, they're pretty much toast. If it's a little high or a little low, it doesn't really matter a whole lot. Just the shock force of that round is going to do it. But I had put my crosshairs on him when I thought that he was at about 50, and he kept walking. I finally got an opening, and I wasn't going to waste time, so I didn't even bother trying to stop him. I just pulled the trigger and shot him in that one opening. And he ran probably 15 yards and stopped. The only way I knew that is not because I could hear him or because I could see him, it's because I heard him stop. The other deer that were there ripped and tore off through the other end of the woods, and I knew they were further to the right, so I could tell geographically where they were at, that they took off and ran, and that he shouldn't be where they went. So I'm standing in the tree. Thank goodness for the saddle, because I was able to let my my bridge out and swing basically like 7 feet off on this limb of this tree, and picked him up in my binoculars that way through a V in a tree at about 80 yards. All I could see was the top of his head and his antlers looking left and right as he was standing there. That was the only way I knew. It's, I mean, pure blind luck that I was able to get to the position where I could to see him. And I watched him like that for, I think, it felt like forever, but I think it was like 4 or 5 minutes. And then I saw him walk off over this little crest down into the creek bottom. And that was the last I saw of him.
So I think this is probably one of the more important parts of the hunt to talk about, just kind of tying into what we talked about a little bit last week, is like, so you shoot and you're paying a ton of attention, whipped your binos out, like trying to pay a ton of attention to where he is, where he's standing, what landmarks you can find, how he's acting. So you said he was flicking his tail a lot too, right?
I didn't see that when he was standing behind that tree. I only was able to see that because I kept those binoculars glued to my face so that I could see where he went if he decided to start walking.
I don't know how he held binoculars and also called a drone recovery service. He's in the tree. That's...
I have the new binos that you just push to talk.
Yeah. Oh, that's a good idea. So he disappeared then into the creek, and you called me. I had my head in a bowl of steaming hot water with like Vicks at the moment under a towel, and I saw Jake come across my phone. I was like, oh boy, 5:00 p.m., golden hour, calling me from the saddle. He's got to have one down. And you said I shot him. So him means that there's a deer that we've seen last year, but more importantly, him because I was able to run into this deer this past summer and happened to have our nice Sony camera with our big 600 lens, and he let me take probably some of the best photos I've ever taken, and have a picture of him blown up in my living room. So when he said him, I knew, okay, the centerpiece of my living room wall is probably got a round in him. So I was equally as pumped. So from there, he backed out, didn't even go look for blood.
No, didn't even walk over there. And that whole thing was all downwind. So I didn't want to... I couldn't tell where the shot was. There's no arrow to go recover at that point. I knew he had a slug in him, and I knew he only ran 15 yards, and then he walked off flickering his tail. To me, that signals probably is a little far back. It's probably paunch, maybe liver. He was quartering away pretty hard. So just get out of there and wait until the next day.
Yep. So came back to the house. I think what's so cool about hunting is like you go through these experiences, you screw up, you fail. We remember as kids. I remember the first buck I ever shot. I gut shot, and Dad and I tracked that thing 5 minutes after I released the arrow. Never found it. And it's like once you have those experiences and you learn, that like we didn't know for sure it was a gut shot, but probably you didn't see him go down, at least back, liver. Just like let him go. You will find that deer.
So what you're saying is you're using your previous knowledge to determine, what are the proper steps to take to increase our odds of finding this deer. Which, there is something to, I think the older generation, we talked about this, had a mentality of just go in there and find it or don't find it. I think it came down to either it's alive or it's not. It's
I remember distinctly as a child going with older men in the family to track deer, and they're like, you shoot it, wait 30 minutes, and then go.
Yep, it's either dead or it's not. And my dad, I remember telling so many stories about just like, I shot the biggest buck of my life, and we went running in there, and there he jumped up, and he was in a bed. Probably would have died there.
Yeah.
Took off running, and probably clotted up, and maybe ended up dying a few properties over, but never recovered them.
Those deer were the same back then as they are now. But it's like we got to go after them. Like we got to go.
Yep. But kind of getting back to you're taking the right steps, and that again kind of goes back to the drone podcast is. We're using previous knowledge to increase our odds. We're not just going to ignore all of the obligation that we have to pay attention to these things, and we're going to do it the right way and most likely come up with the deer at the end.
Yep.
The cool thing about having family and friends that are just as ate up with blood trailing and shooting deer and stuff is even if you would have saw him drop after 30 yards, you probably still wouldn't have gone over there. You know what I mean? You still would have came back to the house and whatever, and even if he went down but maybe was still expiring, you would have came back anyway. So
yeah, I definitely would have. It's way more fun to do that with more people there, and then you get to involve them all in, because even though like the only deer that I have ever killed that I actually watched fall, I still followed the blood trail just like I normally would, because there's still stuff that you can learn. Like that was a deer that I shot with an expandable broadhead and blew right through the chest cavity. I mean, it was straight double lung with like a 2-inch cut broadhead on it. And there wasn't a single drop of blood for like 15 yards. I've never had that happen with the fixed blades that I shoot. There's always blood instantly. So you can still learn things. Even though I saw that deer go down, I still walked step for step where that deer went to learn what I could learn. And when you get multiple people there, then they're all learning that exact same stuff. And maybe they're seeing things that you miss. Even though the deer's dead right there, there's still things you can learn from that process.
I mean, realistically, how many opportunities does one person get in a season to learn something from a blood trail? I mean, for me, it may not be once a year.
Yep.
So to have the opportunity, I mean, we talk about it all the time. Like, I'm dying for somebody to shoot something because I just want to go track something.
Yeah.
Because there's an opportunity to learn there. And when you have buddies that, will wait to take up that track job and you get to take part in that, you kind of get to increase or multiply the opportunities that you have to get out there and learn something.
Yep. Yeah. Which was the downside of shooting it during a work week. You had to
Yeah.
get to work the next morning.
Yeah.
Dad had to go to work the next morning, so it was just Jake and I. I was sicker than a dog, so I was off of work, but I couldn't miss that. I was going to ask you, honestly, if you slept, because I know I didn't. It wasn't because of your deer, because I was coughing all night, but did you sleep?
I can sleep anywhere, and I never have dreams, so I wasn't phased by it at all. After we had talked about it, we regrouped back at the house. I'm walking through the process in my head, and I was trying to review the 360 GoPro footage to see if I could see anything from there, but that camera, the fisheye lenses, you just don't get good zoom, so a deer at 60 yards you can't really see. But in my head, replaying exactly what I saw, I can still see it now in my head, see the crosshairs of the scope on the deer, where I shot. Like I told you, I saw a mule kick, so that to me was a good sign. Then he ran 15 yards and stood there, and then I got to watch his behavior. In my head, I'm thinking, we did everything. If you had to write a book about how to properly blood trail deer that you're unsure about the shot, or maybe you know for a fact it's a little far back, we did everything by that book. It's like, there's no way we're not going to find this deer. As long as it's dead, there's no way we're not going to find it. The risk is, if it is just paunch and you don't get any of that liver or any of the other vitals further up in the cavity, it can live for more than 12 hours. That was the only risk that we ran.
Which is why we kind of considered going in initially at like midnight or something.
Mm-hmm.
And then we were like, you know what? It's freezing cold outside. Let's just give him the full, full 12. So from there that next morning, you met me here. It was right at legal, right?
Yep.
Like right at sunrise.
Yep.
So we took up the track job. I was trying my best not to cough my head off as I walked out there with like 102 degree fever. But we got out there and you were spot on with your landmarks. Like where you were like, this is where the shot was. We found a ton of hair.
Yeah. And it looked like white hair. It didn't look like brown hair. So that made me really nervous initially, because there's only one part of a deer other than the throat patch where a deer has white hair, and that's not where you want to hit them.
We found some white hair with Easton's.
Oh,
But yeah, I did too. It did look, which I thought maybe it could be the exit, but come to find out it wasn't. So yeah, I don't know. That still kind of has me stumped. Although, deer do have different coats. Like some deer are just like so dark brown, some are light brown. So I don't know, but there was a lot of hair. And then right where you said this is where he stood for 4 or 5 minutes, a lot of blood.
Yeah, it was a good pool of blood. So that made me shift gears. Thinking back about it now too, it was like 15 degrees.
Yeah.
There easily could have been frost on that hair, which is why it looked white. Could have been
Yeah.
brown hair that was frost covered or something.
Yeah, maybe.
So, but that I went from crap, it's just hair. Maybe I just grazed the thing's
That's
belly,
what I thought.
and
With the amount of hair, I was like, oh, man.
and then we found all that blood, and I thought, sweet.
The one thing that stayed in the back of my head, though, through all of the questioning was he was with other deer. Those deer ripped out of there, and he went and stood for a long time and then proceeded to walk slow. It's like he's hit.
Unfortunately, I've had experience with gut shot deer that do exactly that. And I think you did too from a couple years ago. We probably all have. But that's the way deer react. The tell.
Right, I meant that you didn't miss.
Right. Yeah.
Or you didn't graze him.
Which is why in my head I'm thinking back, like the crosshairs I settled right on him. I didn't stop him, so that means that as I'm in the process of squeezing the trigger, he's still walking. So odds are the entrance is further back because he walked out of my crosshairs. I remember seeing what looked distinctly to me like a mule kick. That's not something you just see in your head. If a deer does that, it's pretty obvious that they're doing it. And then he stopped at 15 yards and walked over down into the creek. And I didn't notice that his back was hunched, which is usually the tell of like a gut shot deer. But flickering his tail, he never stopped flickering that tail.
It's always a good sign.
So
yeah.
So from there, we followed blood for probably, 40 yards maybe?
Yeah, we followed good blood.
Good blood. Pretty dark red blood, which was making me think liver.
Yep.
But then it just stopped.
We were finding like a tiny pinhead of a drop every 6 yards.
Yeah. And then there was like some brighter red pinkish blood, which made me think, is it like muscle? Is it
Yeah.
a muscle hit? Because we didn't think lungs based on just the fact that you didn't see him go down.
Yep.
So all those things are running through our head. We thought about calling our buddy Jake, who's got a dog. But luckily we tracked him to that creek, and that's where we started finding some beds, which was concerning, but also I think a good thing because we knew, okay, he was hurt. Those beds were all within, 10, 15 yards of each other?
There were 4 or 5 beds with blood in them as wide as this room is. So that's usually a good sign too, because once they bed down, they're hurting bad enough to bed down, they're probably not going to walk another 300 yards.
And if he gets up out of that bed and decides to lay back down within a few steps, like
It hurt too bad.
yeah, that kind of tells you right there he's not trying to go anywhere.
Yeah, and nothing bumped him. If there's a bed and then just a trail for another 100 yards,
Right.
like something got him up.
Right.
So from there, this was kind of fun for me. Jake since there was beds scattered everywhere, there was like a blood trail scattered everywhere. So Jake kind of took it one way, which ended up leading to another bed. I took it a different direction, which led me straight to the buck, but I didn't let Jake know that. So he wasn't far from that first group of beds. All in all, I mean, he probably only
We were
lit
probably
80
15 yards
right?
from us.
Yeah.
You were 15 yards from me in the 3rd or 4th bed, and we were probably, maybe 50 or 60 yards from where he stopped behind that tree and stood, which was another 15 yards from where I actually shot him. So
Yeah. So I pulled the camera out in my... I felt terrible. Just we'll say that, but I felt terrible. But I felt good enough that I could make a little joke or pull a little joke on Jake. So I filmed myself and said that I was going to call Jake over, and I had already found it and let him know that I think we need to back out. We're not going to find this thing. I don't think you hit him good. So I said, Jake, I got a little blood over here, and he came walking over, and I was recording, and I think I said, I don't think you're going to find this deer, man. Saying that as in because I already found him, and you didn't really look at me first. And so I was thinking oh, he's probably because I'm usually pretty positive with that type of stuff.
you said there's blood on the ground, and I think we should back out. And I'm thinking, no, where's the blood? Let's keep following this trail because I'm not giving up.
I thought you were probably thinking you dick. I'm sitting here hoping to find this deer, and you giving up. You're giving up on this thing. And so then I said again, I don't think we're gonna find this thing. And you looked up at me kind of in question, and then I said, because I already found him.
Yeah,
that was fun for me. In case you were wondering,
That is such a good feeling. I remember that the one year you shot that one, and we tracked it for a ways. And at one point, I remember smelling something, and I'm like, "Gosh, I think I smell a deer." Well, then I look down, and I think it's in the video.
It is, yeah.
I'm standing in the middle of a scrape.
Yep.
And I'm like, that's what that was. For sure, just standing. I'm literally smelling pee in the scrape. And then we tracked a little bit further, and we're standing there, and I look over, and the buck's laying in just this nasty thing of mottled floral rose. And I caught the reflection from his eyeball when I shined my light over there. And so I flipped my and it is just a fun thing to do, is just be I was like, what if I told you he's laying right here? You're like, dude, shut up.
Yeah.
You're no way. And I'm like, no, he's right here, right next to us.
I'm trying to think now that you bring that up. So that deer of mine, you found. My buck the next year, you found. Last year, I guess the dog did. I found your buck that same year as mine. I found your buck this year. I feel very rarely do we find our own deer this year, which we'll get to. Neither of us found yours.
Back in 2019, you guys all found my deer.
Yeah.
The only buck that I've ever actually seen with my own eyes during the recovery process is the one I watched die. Every other deer that I've blood trailed because I've shot, I'm on the blood trail, and these guys around me are eyes up scanning the
That's
horizon.
probably what it is. You're so intently following the blood trail because it's your responsibility, your deer, and everybody else is up there peeking. Yeah. But yeah, so we were pretty stoked then. Just super cool too, because all the history we had with that deer. Anymore, that's just so much. And not that I would never pass a deer that I didn't have history with, but that's just so much more interesting.
Well, it is interesting. You can learn more about it. It's cool because you get to evaluate the deer's behavior year over year. You can learn a lot more about how whitetails behave, their patterns, their home ranges. Some deer, that home range shrinks right down. Some deer are roamers, and you can learn that if you've got history with a deer. If it's a random encounter, I find that to be exciting in the tree, but you don't learn near as much from that situation.
Yeah. So I got to ask the tough question, Jake, that everybody wants to know. Did any part of you consider passing him because of his broken tine? So this deer is a mainframe 9-pointer, huge frame, big G2s, probably 11-inch G2s.
Yeah, I never
and
measured it. But
snapped one right off at the base. Did any part of you go, oh man, I might let him go?
I haven't shot enough bucks in my life to let him go.
No, I don't blame you one bit. Just a tough question.
Well, and at the end of the day, too, I mean, we eat venison like mad. I mean, my whole family, my kids love it. We use it in every recipe that my wife makes. So the meat is a big deal, and the antlers are an added bonus. But if it's a broken tine and it's a deer we've got some history with, I don't know that I would pass it.
Well,
not a deer of that caliber.
We try to shoot mature deer too, and he was, I think, definitely at least a 4-year-old, based on the history we have and looking at him year to year, body and everything. So, yeah, if he was a 2-3-year-old, I think maybe that could play in a little bit more. But we try to shoot mature deer, and I think,
or if he had more than just one broken tine, because then it's all messed up.
I'm the king of shooting deer with broken tines, dude. I have so many deer with broken beams and tines. I wouldn't have passed him either. I was just curious what your thoughts were on that.
Would you?
I mean, my deer was broken, but not his antlers. Well, his antlers were, I guess, his antlers were broken too a little bit, but I would struggle. I don't know.
Yeah.
It depends to what degree he was broken, I think.
If
Yeah.
we had a bunch of other good ones showing up too, other prospects to
Sure.
continue hunting, I might have
Yeah.
thought differently about it. But it's so sparse this year.
Something that always hangs me up on that too is it's still the deer. You know what I mean? Like
It's
he broke
the same
it, but
buck.
you still beat the deer. You still accomplish what you wanted to accomplish. He was going to act the same way with that broken tine or not. You know what I mean? So I think it's easy to get hung up on for some people, but like he's still that deer with that rack. It's laying out there somewhere. Maybe we'll find it. That'd be pretty cool.
Maybe.
And to somebody that's standard is maturity, you're beating the brain, the
Yeah.
4-year-old brain, the 5-year-old brain. Like
Yeah.
he's just as smart. Like
Yeah.
it doesn't change his wit.
Yep.
So yeah.
Yeah, if he didn't disappear for about a month, I'd be like, just with how much we walked that property, I'd be like, you could find it. People have done it. I mean, I found spikes before.
Did you take him out of your pocket?
It was in my pants. Yeah, I found spikes before. Like, that'd be pretty cool. Yeah,
Starts with a simple inverse exhale.
with a simultaneous relaxing of the sphincter. I was actually going to pull that out for something else, but it seemed like a good time. So
You could. I mean, you never know. You never know. But I don't. That's not going to stop me from shooting a deer.
no, that right side, holy cow. His beam that's a nice deer. So super stoked, super pumped. Jake, that's probably second biggest buck.
Yeah, it's close. We'll have to get the tape on him.
Yep.
The other one is not as wide, but taller, and I think has a little bit more mass. But
Yeah, an awesome deer nonetheless. So feed the family, look good on the wall. And now I got to decide if I'm going to give Jake maybe you guys can drop a comment. Should I give Jake my big, nice canvas portrait of this thing?
I think it'd make it just a good stocking stuffer. Maybe make his own copy.
my
Yeah.
socks aren't big enough for
I
that.
was gonna say make his own copy for him.
Yeah.
A little
I think
Christmas
I,
gift.
I think you should keep it because then we each have a part in this story. We each get a trophy for the wall.
Sure.
I get the buck, and you get the photo of the buck.
I talked about coming over after you killed it with a Sharpie and just putting an X through him.
Wasted. Don't. Yeah. Every morning I come out and go, I'm just kidding. So you guys will see the film or the actual video of Jake's hunt, but wanted to get it out in podcast form first. So super fun hunt, and you're a 2-buck year. I kind of totally forgot you got a buck in Montana and then got a buck in Ohio. It's pretty cool.
If it had forks,
Yeah. Your Ohio buck was a little bit bigger.
a little bit, a little bit.
So Easton's hunt now, just a few short days after Jake killed, right? December 1st?
Yep.
First. Dang, so bang, bang. You guys, in 2020, we just kept the hot streak going.
It was I forget what did that turn out to be like? Our best 3 bucks.
In a 10-day stretch?
Yeah, I was gonna say it was
When
almost a week.
When did you kill?
October 10th.
No, it was because mine was like the 29th.
I believe I was the 4th of October.
And that was the 10th.
So that'd be like a 2-week period. We killed 3 slammers.
Well,
not your best buck anymore.
No, actually, I outdid the 2020 buck in 2021, and then generally I'll do. I think it's 2 years I'll kill in a row, and then I skip a year, and then and it's been like that. I think for 3 cycles.
you're on the 2 on 1 off program.
Yeah, and it seems to be working out.
you got
just
a
fine.
rest year.
Yep.
Oh shoot! So let's start from the top with yours. You were out there during gun season. You had the old smoke pole out there, huh?
Sure. No. Yeah, my smoke pole with a stick and string. That would have been
Kudos,
December.
by the way.
Yeah, December 1st. So unfortunately November didn't pay off for me, but it only took 1 day of December to get it done.
Yeah,
That's
good luck
term.
bow hunting during gun season. See how that one turns out, buddy.
I feel like I mentioned that on the last podcast. Yeah, I
think you did.
a feller say, yeah, keep hunting with a bow during gun season.
I mean,
Let me know how that turns out.
If you can get in bow range during bow season, why can't you get in bow? The deer are the same deer.
I ended up talking to him that next Monday. He was like, "Well, I just meant that it was way easier to kill him with a gun. It comes down to again convenience. And,
Oh yeah, way easier.
yeah, easier. That's the way we want to do things."
I went the easy route.
Which I full disclosure, I do want to mention, I would have gun hunted this deer. As much as I'd like to take full credit for bow hunting, I'm glad it panned out the way it did. And in hindsight, I'm super glad that I had to hunt it with a bow. Yeah, hunt it with a bow. However, I requested permission to gun hunt, and I was politely denied. So, fortunately, I ended up getting it with a bow.
You gotta hunt the way you can by the landowner's permission when there's a deer like that roaming those woods.
So property you have permission on, he just only wants you to bow hunt, to clarify.
Correct.
Yep.
Yeah, just to keep things consistent. There are some other people that have access to hunt, and I mean, I guess to keep things, same across the board, it was easiest to just let me bow hunt.
You can't blame them.
No, absolutely not. Nope. I mean, unless I have people throwing properties at me that I can pick and choose, beggars can't be choosers. And yeah, I mean, I have places that I could have taken a gun and hunted that week with a gun, but yeah, when you have a deer like that showing up, and I felt like I was getting close, I figured my odds were best there.
A deer like that, but just pull the thing up. Just get him up. Let's get him out here. Let's see this thing. We don't even need to score him. We just need to weigh him. Look at that. Look at that sucker. I don't know what camera. Oh my goodness. Look at that thing.
Throw him up there.
Jeez. He's probably 120.
At least.
He'll go Pope and Young.
Yeah,
Jeez.
I think so.
Look at that thing.
So this is now my best buck.
I'd say. I green scored him at. Well, it doesn't even matter. Never mind.
Well, wait a minute. Like your best buck by 5 inches, 15 inches.
Probably about 5 to 10, maybe. Yeah, the buck. I never scored the deer that I got in 2021. That was with a gun. And I think maybe I've mentioned, and this is strictly me. What other people do is perfectly a-okay. I felt kind of a diminished sense of accomplishment with the deer in 2021. It was over a corn pile, using a cell cam with a rifle. This is just my personal, journey of hunting deer, doing deer things. This one checked all the boxes that I personally seek out to kill a deer.
Still fun, but this takes a cake for sure.
Absolutely. Yep.
Yeah, when you can hunt them when they're just, they have no clue you're there. There's
They're
no
just them.
outside influence. There's no manipulation of anything. I mean, you could even take it a step further with yours and no food plots or anything on this property. Like you literally are just hunting him in his domain. There was nothing.
Yeah. So I have a note here in front of me. This property it's a permission piece, pretty small piece. And we got this, I want to say it would have been the summer of 2015 door knocking. And the guy said, yeah, but otherwise from just being allowed to go out there and hunt, it's I would call a minimal access type property. I'm not allowed to put food plots in. I'm not out there baiting, doing all the things that some pieces allow you to do.
Yeah, minimal access also of literal. Like you can only get into this property one way.
Yeah.
Right through his driveway.
Yeah. You shoot up the driveway and you're basically in the corner of the woods.
Yeah.
And from there, it's one way in, one way out.
Pretty good neighborhood. Holds a lot of good deer. But you knew about this deer the year before for sure. and maybe the year prior to that, but definitely last year.
Yeah, last year when I started running into him, I don't think I looked back at previous trail cam photos to determine whether he had been there in 2021. This year, looking back, there is potential that I have pictures of him in 2021, but between last year and this year, you can't deny.
Yeah,
I
you
mean,
can't.
how
I mean,
similar they are.
It's ridiculous.
These inside points, I don't know if it's hard to see in the camera angles, but they're mimicking each other year to year. Just the size is a little bigger.
That is like he grew the exact antler.
It is
the exact antler.
Same curl. Yeah.
And even the points just outside of his brow tines.
Yep.
He had those as well. I guess at least on this side.
Yeah.
So cool. That's so cool to have sheds off a buck.
And-
Absolutely awesome.
Yeah,
He threw on insane mass. Insane mass. Move this way a little out of your face, Jake. That his right side, that would have been a cool shed to find. I can't imagine finding that shed, the right one.
Oh yeah, yeah. I was gonna say I don't want to fast track ahead, but yeah, we ended up picking up both sides. Actually, Nick picked up the one, and I ended up picking up the other.
Which is such a cool story. But let's start back. So you saw him, you had an encounter with him. So that would have been 22.
Yes, yeah. So October sometime. I'm not sure if it was early or late or mid. Went in a morning hunt and was set up in the saddle. I don't remember if I already had the set out there or if I set it up that morning. But I remember setting up later than I wanted to be in there. And as I was getting set up, I'm not sure if I had the bow pulled up quite yet. And
I feel like you didn't, because I think I remember you texting me saying my bow's even on the ground.
Yeah.
I could be wrong, but
Yeah, I want to say that maybe the bow was still on the ground.
I've been there too.
Oh, yeah. It was okay because it was a few minutes before daylight, but this deer came in. I heard him coming in, and it was just light enough I could see. And he came in at I started seeing him at 15 yards, and he's coming straight at me. And he walks in front of a trail cam that I had out and ends up coming within 5 yards of my tree. And once he gets to that point, he pretty much looks up into my soul and spooks. And I knew at that point it was a good deer. And I remember thinking to myself, it's probably one I would shoot. And had I had the bow up there, maybe he would have stayed calm enough, assuming I didn't spook him, that I could have let it get light, maybe 5-10 more minutes, and got a shot off. But instead, he ran.
Did he take his soul with you when he ran? It does feel like
part
that,
of it,
doesn't it?
Yeah, part of it. Not that I had a whole lot to give, but
can you imagine as a deer, just going about your business, you're just like, oh God.
That's a dude.
That's a guy.
He's up in the tree. Yeah. So, and luckily last year he ended up sticking around. I don't think that was the first I had pictures of him or anything, but that was kind of when I started to really pay attention to him.
Yeah.
Ended up getting quite a few pictures on that same camera. He hugged tight to that specific, real small piece, but hugged real tight to that specific corner of the woodlot. And, ended up watching him for most of the rest of the year. And it seemed like the later in the season it got, the more consistent he became.
Yeah, of just trying to think back to deer we've hunted, I think he's got to take the cake of at least for part of the year, the smallest home range.
Yeah.
I feel like he literally lived in a corner of a woodblock.
And
it's
most
not a
consistent pattern too. You're talking about him walking probably the same 2 trails every time he walks that section.
Yeah.
And that's, how big is that woodlot, you think? I guess it kind of joins some other bigger pieces.
Yeah, it joins some other properties. It's in the teens, maybe in the mid-20s, but yeah, it's relatively small.
Pretty small. Yeah, which I think is important to point out. We're not hunting, big, huge timber, big woods or anything like that. It's farm country.
Yeah. This is the first deer I've killed up here since 2015.
Really?
8 years.
Oh, you've been down south that whole time.
Yep.
Huh?
Yep.
No, way up north. Up in the
UP.
We hunted in Alabama and Mississippi a little bit too.
A little bit way
in the
down south in the
swamps.
deep, the deep woods, way down there. But yeah, 2015, and it was the last time I killed a deer on this property.
Oh, wow.
Yep.
That's wild.
Yep.
Huh. I didn't realize it'd been that long.
Yeah, Alabama's
always
treated
had-
me well.
Always had good ones there though, huh?
So it's funny. It's an incredibly hard area to hunt because of the sheer number of deer that are out there. You virtually have to hunt the fringes of the woods. You can't push in, and even then, you're basically hunting over a field edge, And there's so many deer out there every single time you hunt that usually your hunt blows up, no matter what you do. I mean, you can try to play the wind and do anything you want to try to do, and it pretty much always, blows up right there in your face.
Which is a good problem to have. It's one place deer number, well, I mean, not necessarily, but the deer number wise, that's one place that they seem to be decent still.
Yeah, I think it may have been 2017. There was a 174-inch that was killed out there, not on the same property, but it was a deer that I had pictures of and was hunting a little bit that was killed. But aside from that, I want to say this is the biggest deer I've had on camera since then. So, I mean, it's not every year I get to chase a 170. Yeah.
Yep. So after the season last year would have been, was that March? It had to be March.
March.
I was driving. I don't even remember why I was out there. I think I was talking to a landowner out there about shed hunting permission, I believe, for us to just go shed hunt, have some fun, whatever. And I happened to be driving a road close to this property and looked out into the field, and was it rye? It's like a rye. Or no, it was brassicas. It was brassicas. That's right. And I saw
cover crop. Turnips or whatever.
Yep. I saw a big shed laying out there, and we have hunted this property. We gained access to that property. Was it 2018? Mm-hmm. I think it was 2018. Yep. So it's like cool. So went out and grabbed the shed. Nice antler. Immediately called Easton. Was like, dude, I just found a nice shed, big beam on this thing. And I don't remember if I sent you a picture and you recognized it, or
in the passenger seat of your truck.
Yeah, I think I might have even buckled them in.
I think so. Yeah,
one of my nicest sheds.
They're worth it. They're worth it.
Yeah, and I don't remember though. Did you recognize it? I don't think you did.
I don't remember at what point we put 2 and 2 together on this one.
I'm not sure either. All I know is you went back out to the area to the property you ended up killing this deer on and found his other side. Lo and behold.
Yeah. How far apart were these two antlers?
I would say probably 700 yards, roughly.
How many days apart?
I found mine on the 16th of March. I couldn't figure out what day you found yours.
I could tell you.
I want to say it was within 2 weeks.
Yeah, I think so. That sounds right. I remember once we realized we have 2 antlers from the same deer. You came over and I handed it to Easton and I played the Reunited and it feels so good. So yeah, and at that point we're like, dude, that's a good buck. And then you realize I saw this deer.
Yeah, because so the brassica field that we mentioned was exactly what was creating such a just like defined bed to feed pattern. He was going out of this particular bedding area and going straight to that brassica field every single evening, and ended up dropping his,
which is across a road.
Yeah, he was crossing a road.
It is cover crop, right? It's not a food plot that's been planted
correct.
there.
No,
it's
it was
just covered
very, very large area.
Deer were hammering it.
Well, yeah. I mean,
you could pretty much drive out there every night and see 50 or more deer.
Yep.
I mean, I remember nights when it was just light enough that you could still see, and just, I mean, your jaw hit the floor. Yep. How are the brassicas working out for you, by the way?
For those that are listening, I can get them to grow great. I was back there trying to find a Christmas tree, and I picked a couple, and they're beautiful. Like, not too big, not too small. I'm like, I grew this. The deer are so ungrateful though, and they won't even touch them. It's ridiculous. Don't know why.
It's like growing a garden with vegetables for your kids, and your kids don't like veggies.
I think this is the 4th year. Not in a row. We've, planted brassicas on and off for the last, 8 years or so. I think this is the 4th year I've planted them, and never once do they pay any attention to them.
Because they get slammed by most people that plant those things.
Well, and we do everything right, like soil test. Like,
if you didn't do it right, they wouldn't look the way they look.
Plant them when you're supposed to plant them. Yeah, you go back there right now, the plot looks like you pulled it off a TV. It's beautiful, but they don't touch them. I guess this year I didn't do everything right, though. I tried to not grow them, and they still grew.
You were deliberately trying to terminate the plot, and it was still growing back.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. So back to the deer. Trying to think. Yeah. So finally, you gave me that other shed, and I remember distinctly thinking, like, I didn't even want to take the shed because, I mean, at that point, 7 years not killing a deer out there, like really not even close. And I figured there was absolutely no hope in ever catching up with this deer. Like, actually, I remember telling you before I ended up killing him that I was going to give you the shed back.
Which I joke about it, but like, I don't care at all. Like I willingly was like, you should have this shed. You hunt the property for God's sakes. Like you're hunting this deer. Plus I found it from the road. How cheap is that?
It was easy.
It was easy. Yeah. Yep. But yeah, you did. I remember you saying, if I don't kill this thing, I'm giving it back, which I would not have accepted it. But now you definitely get to keep it.
Yeah. So fast forward to 2023 in early season, I was getting pictures of a buck that was very comparable to what this deer looked like last year. I think in velvet, I had a picture of him and I was like, oh, he's back. And I think he had something that resembled that inside point on his left side. And that was kind of the telltale sign for me is, there he is. But he wasn't really that impressive, and I told you about him. And I spent some of the early season in September and October trying to target this deer. And I ended up seeing him and really wasn't that enthused because I was convinced that something better would show up elsewhere.
I remember you sending me the trail cam picture and then talking about your encounter with him. We were like, how did he not throw on anything? Like, how did he not grow at all?
Yep.
He looks almost identical to last year.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I mean, I have so much experience with deer returning and not growing at all. So, like, I was not fazed by it, but still kind of surprised, especially because in this area, there is so much food available to them that I expect them a little bit more, to put on some inches year to year. Yeah.
Yeah, to throw a better rack. I think that's the new terminology. Man, how do you throw that rack?
Oh, well,
that's what I've been hearing.
Yeah. So, I guess to get to the actual deer coming back, it was, I don't remember what weekend it was. It was basically a full week before I ended up killing him. I get a picture, and here he is coming out exactly the same trail that he was on last late season when he dropped that shed from the bed to feed pattern, coming straight out. And I'm like, holy smokes, like friggin' monster.
Yeah.
But I don't know if you remember me, either it was in person or I called you, and I'm like, I don't know if this is the same deer that I had early season.
Yeah.
Like, he looks way too big now.
He's huge now.
Yeah, I actually, you know what I told you? I was like, unless he grew while he was hardhorn, like, there's no way.
Yeah.
No way it's the same deer. Yeah, so ended up getting that particular picture, and then I had another camera probably maybe 200 yards away and ended up getting 2 pictures of him there that same weekend. This was all probably like a Friday and Saturday deal when I got 3 or 4 different pictures of him.
The week before gun season? So this has been before Thanksgiving.
Yeah. Yep. Basically.
You even threw a hunt at him before, didn't you? Didn't you hunt him one time before gun season? Or no? I thought you did.
Maybe. I don't remember.
Maybe not. I could be mistaken. But okay, so you devised a plan at that time for gun season with your bow to slip in there and try to get an arrow in him. And your first set, were you like hunting the trail that he was using, or you didn't, did you?
No. So I don't remember what made me do it. It might have been kind of determined based on the wind direction, but I went to basically the opposite corner of this chunk that he was coming out on. I was completely probably, 500 yards away from where he was coming out. And I think that had mostly to do with the wind, but ended up getting in there, and that was the night I was referring to my drone experience.
Okay. That's right. So so go back and listen to the last podcast. You'll want to hear this.
Yeah. So that would have been Wednesday of gun season. I don't know what day that would have been. Late November. I don't know what day you killed.
The 28th. It was a Tuesday.
So you've been the 29th.
29th. Yeah. 29th, ended up going out and basically, had some experiences with neighbors using drones, and then ended up seeing a pretty decent buck. He came out and, again, ran into the same issue of too many eyes on me, and my wind wasn't strong enough to carry my thermals out of that low spot. And
just
that deer
sucked
ended
it
up
right down the hill.
Yeah.
Did you say that you kicked him, though? Did you say that?
Yes, I haven't said.
Okay.
Was just about to backtrack. That night going in, of course, I have to access through the cut cornfield, and I decided to loop way out and around, like basically to the middle of the cornfield, because I was figuring if I walk that edge and for some reason I bump him or another deer, I'd rather bump him from 150 yards because he sees me. There's no way for him to smell me, but I'd rather bump him because he sees me from 150 yards away than sneak up on him.
Cut corn now?
Correct. Yep. So I figured it'd be better to bump him from a distance than sneak up on him at 30 yards and spook him and really let him tear out of there.
Soft spook instead of a hard spook.
Correct. Yeah. So I saw a substantial buck get up out of a bed and kind of trot away back into the timber. That was before the hunt. And then obviously after, I ended up spooking a completely different deer along with probably 15 other deer. I just decided to bail that night and get out.
Gosh, can you imagine seeing 15 deer?
Not anymore. Yeah, I remember you called me because Jake had just called me, you know, whatever, the 28th or whenever that was, at like 5 and killed one. I knew you were hunting and you called me at like 5 and I was like, he absolutely killed one. And I was like, I think I maybe said like, you got one. And you were like, no, I'm back in my truck. I just, you know, I spooked a deer or something. I was like, dang.
I was like, I think I said I quit hunting.
Maybe. Yeah. I was like, damn,
I gave it up.
I thought for sure you
5
killed
minutes
him.
ago.
Yeah.
No, I think it sounded like, hello.
He
That's
sounded
right.
like that?
Oh yeah, yeah.
It was like coughing my head off.
Yeah, before I let him get a word out, I was trying to say like I didn't get anything. Like don't get excited.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yep. So I was only hunting evenings for that week because it's too hard to get in there in the morning time. So then, fast forward to Thursday, I wanted to set up in my saddle because I had a tree stand set up down in that corner. I hunted the night previous, and I went to get my sticks out and realized I didn't have any straps.
Oh, yeah, that's fun too.
Yeah. Yep. So my primary set of sticks was down with the tree stand. So I decided that must be a sign that I'm supposed to go hunt that same old tree stand. And I don't even really, I do remember what happened that night. I ended up looping way out around. And this time I was super conscientious of watching the timber from my walk in. Because I'm like, if he's bedded there again, I'm not sure how I'm going to.
That all lays lower than the hill. So you're walking, are you skylined up there?
Oh, yeah.
Pretty much.
Yep. So I was super conscientious about, I had my binos ready and I'm scanning the timber and I'd walk, 15, 20 yards, scan the timber. And to my knowledge, I got in clean that night.
If you just would have took a drone up, you could have figured out if he was in there or not. You'd have been fine.
Yep. I would have known exactly where he was at. Yeah.
I
Probably
guess-
would have killed him potentially that night because I would have known where he was at.
Yeah.
But you could have just
stop.
landed the drone and then it's not aiding in your
At
hunt.
that point, it is a legal hunt.
Yeah.
Yes. I don't see where there's a potential for abuse here. You guys are nuts.
Yeah.
So ended up hunting the same stupid tree stand that night, and for whatever reason, it was super, super slow. Like, did not see anything.
That would've
Probably
been what day?
Thursday,
Okay.
the 30th. Is there 30 days in November?
Yeah.
Gotta be.
There's got to be.
Yeah, it was.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So, towards last light, a little bit before last light, I spun around and looked out into the cut corn, and a long ways off, there was a huge herd of does. I mean, like probably 20, 25.
All yarded up, huh?
Oh yeah. I mean, thick. And luckily they were far enough off that my wind was kind of blowing up their way, but evidently far enough away that it wasn't affecting them too much. And then probably 5 minutes left illegal, I see one lone deer kind of cutting across the cornfield. Further up the tree line, basically straight towards my truck, is where he would have come out, and he's cutting over towards those does. And I grabbed my binos, pulled up on him, and it was getting dark, but instantly, for sure, the deer. Like,
You can tell.
yeah, definitely the deer I was after. Watched him feed, and I was nervous about getting out that night because I basically had to walk straight towards my truck, and at some point I had to give that deer my wind. I had to give all the deer my wind because it was coming out of the south. So watched him and waited till it was beyond dark, and ended up looping way out around because I knew regardless I had to give him my wind, but I'd rather do it from, even if I can get 100 extra yards.
Yeah.
Yep.
I did. So I went way deep into the timber. I knew the buck that I was after was not, in there.
Yep, right.
Basically looped way out around. Took a thorn straight to the eyeball because I refused to use a light. Normally I'll use like a light on a low setting. Thorn straight into my left eye.
Think about that too. We used to be scared of the dark. Now you're staying in there on purpose into the just darkness of the night and then walking deeper into the dark timber.
Yeah.
You've come such a long way.
I know. I'm actually, this year particularly was like a shift. Like I haven't had too many spooky moments. Yeah. So I at one point I did hear deer blowing as I was getting really close to my truck. But it sounded like generally the area that the does were, he was probably 150 yards off from them still. So there was a distinct difference in the area that I was hearing the deer blowing from. So I hoped at that point I got out of there clean. So then fast forward to Friday, and I had hit a breaking point at this point. Like, I was over hunting, just like really questioning why I do everything that I do, because it never seems to pay off.
You can put together what you think is a great plan, and you can set the wind up right, and then the deer do something different than they've been doing for the last 3 days that made you make that decision.
Yeah.
And then somebody goes out there and sits on a bucket in a flannel.
Yeah.
And, well, I guess we were flannels, but you know what I mean? And like somebody who does, and no, like kudos, like great job to them, but like, it just makes you think like, God, I spent all this time, all this money. It's like,
Everything, you can have the best plan in the world, and it all takes a little bit of luck.
yeah. Oh yeah.
You can't help but feel like I deserve it.
Yeah.
None of us deserve anything. Like, that deer doesn't owe you its life. But when you put so much work into it, you're like, gosh, what am I doing here?
How are these guys killing giants, not even caring? Maybe that's the ticket. I don't know.
Yep. Yeah. So, and I should mention, the Thursday night, I was actually watching with my binoculars, and there's one other guy that hunts close to the area. And I heard a shot come from where I thought he was. So
one other guy hunts close to the area and kills big deer.
Sure. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. So I was watching this deer with my binoculars as I hear a shot that I knew he wasn't shooting at this deer. He couldn't have been. So I'm thinking, okay, that's great. If he shot a deer, that means, he's probably one less person that might be after him.
Yep.
So then Friday, I'm fed up. I'm like, I got to really hammer down here and figure this out. So it was raining that day, and I wasn't even going to hunt. And I think in my interview on Thursday, I mentioned, this is probably my last hunt for the week. And I kept my eye on the forecast, and I saw that somewhere around like 2:00, it was supposed to end. And I was just like licking my chops. So I go out there, and it's super windy, misty, just this nasty weather, rain. Yeah.
Kind of like what you want in October.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's late October, misty, nasty rains.
Yep. So I hadn't shot my bow in a little while, and I decide I'm gonna park, shoot my bow, get dressed, all away from where I normally do. Like, because normally I'm kind of within sight of this wood lot and stuff. So I decide I'm taking every last precaution possible. So I shoot the bow, everything's good there, get dressed, drive to the parking area, park, and then walk in. And this time I came prepared with straps and decided that I was going to make the shift to where I figured he was going to come out from the night before, where he came out from the night before.
So you didn't loop out then, did you? You just
I
cut
did.
straight down?
No,
Oh, you still
I
did?
still
So you looped and then
way
like
out.
cut straight at it?
Yep. Looped way out, probably 150 yards out from that tree line, and classed it, double checked, he wasn't there, and then went straight at it. And basically I tried to pick a tree from afar.
Yeah.
Just looking, because I'm like, okay, what from this distance looks to be the most open as far as shots, not, as far as cover goes. And ended up basically setting up from the spot that I had picked. And I'm so bad about it. Just sit there and like debate within myself. Really bad about that. And ended up picking a tree.
It's like 5:15. You set up, or did you get him? No, I'm still picking a tree.
I feel like I've done that. And I'm not kidding. I feel like I've done that to where I'm like sweating bullets because
I got a half
can't
hour to
decide.
hunt.
Yeah.
I definitely have done that
Oh,
in
yeah.
the morning in the dark, because it is so much more difficult to find a tree, especially if you haven't hunted like in that specific area before.
Yeah.
So I feel you.
Yeah. So finally I pick a tree, and it's kind of crooked. It goes up maybe, 10 or 12 feet, and then it has this real nasty bend to it and then goes straight up again.
Praise God for saddles.
Exactly.
That's also a killing tree. I feel like some of our biggest bucks have come out of like the weirdest trees.
The one I was in when I shot my buck this year grew straight up, and it had an offshoot branch that came off and made like a U. I had to climb up this side and then climb over that side to get into the tree where I wanted to be. So yeah the gnarly trees.
Killing tree.
I remember I was disgusted with how the setup felt, though, the first time I got up in it. So you went up 2 sticks, and then to the third stick, it basically would have had to been sideways. And this is not my, I don't know if you want to call it like my preferred set of sticks. This is kind of my old backup pair. And they're too long. They're not short sections. So I had to span this weird bend in the tree. So I basically at one point did like a 90-degree spin around the side of the tree, got up that last, 3-foot section or whatever, and then set up my platform. And the first time I set up the platform, it was too high because there was a big branch that came off that would have been in my way. So I dropped platform, and this was very unintentional, but when I dropped the platform, it was now parallel with the top stick, basically to where my platform is in equal height with the two. I used double sticks.
There's a lot of guys that set up that way purposefully, intentionally.
And now I see why. I had never even considered it. So that's just, I basically just had to drop the platform to get to where I wanted to be comfort-wise. And then there was also a dead tree that had fallen up against this tree. So I had, a little bit of cover, but for being right on the field edge and knowing he was going to be coming out of the timber, like I didn't have a lot. So I needed every last bit I could get.
Yeah.
So you put the tree in between you and where he was coming from on purpose, anticipating shooting him in the woods before he even got to the cut corn. Right?
That was my hope.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because,
but then still being able, if he gets past you, to swing out.
Yep. I knew I could
turn
spin.
around.
So I'm facing into the timber. I have the main trunk of the tree that I'm in between me and the timber, and then there's also this deadfall. So I felt like even if he was coming at me, I could spin as well to put that tree between me and him, ideally get a shot at him in the timber, and then obviously to swing to the left. I mean, that's
That is what's so cool about the saddle, because I have set my stand up like that before. We're like, okay, here's the trail that I'm anticipating him using. I'm going to face my stand the other way, and then the whole hunt stand in my tree stand facing that and have the tree to cover. But with the saddle, you can always basically keep it in between you. I guess not. You can't get 360 around it, but
Oh yeah, you can.
I was gonna say.
I
did. Yeah.
I guess if the tree's small enough.
Yeah, I mean,
that's sweet.
In my hunt, after I shot that deer, I'm not kidding, because I DIY'd my lineman's rope and my tether and all that stuff. So I've just got the saddle. I made those things extra long. So like, I'm not kidding you. The tree that I was hanging in had a branch that came off, and it shot up at about a 45-degree angle. And I what are those things called? A ropeman one. Mm-hmm. I let that thing out as far as I could go, and I was able to shimmy. I'm not kidding, like 6 or 7 feet out that limb to try to get a look at that deer. Like I can fall certainly, but I know I have a fall rest system on me.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah,
risk it.
that's
You can
a
do
great
crazy things in a saddle, man.
Shout out to Cruiser Saddles.
Absolutely. Yeah, love them. Absolutely. Trying to think. Well, I don't know where to go from there.
Well, in your situation, the other advantage of a saddle, which you probably took into account, is if you do what you did with the stand, there's a window there that you absolutely can't shoot
For sure.
with your bow. Whereas in a saddle, you can swing right or left off of your platform to get a shot at that thing.
Yep.
And I love how I feel so stable. Sometimes in a tree stand, I don't trust my balance. Like, I know I'm not going anywhere when I'm in a saddle.
You always have. I mean, just like they say when you're climbing the tree with your lineman's rope, you're supposed to have 3 points of contact on the tree at all times. 2 hands and a foot, 2 feet and a hand, whatever. If you're on a platform like that, you've got 2 feet, and your third point of contact is your tether. Mm-hmm. So you've always got a tripod to the tree, which makes it a lot more stable. You can hold yourself a lot better that way.
Yeah. Yeah. So I'm trying to think.
It was a slow hunt, right?
It was a long, slow hunt.
Was there?
What time were you said you got out there, saw the rain was going to break at about 2:00. So what time did you actually get into the tree?
I want to say, I don't remember it even just.
Probably right about then. I'm pretty sure you told me, because I remember asking you when it broke there, because I remember here I was like, oh boy, this could cook up nicely. And I think, didn't you say you pretty much got in when it was breaking?
Yeah, it was when I was comfortably set up that it was starting to break, because I had to actually take my beanie off and put it over top of my camera because the camera was getting
It's probably
wet.
like, what, 1:30?
No, I want to say I was set up like 2:45.
Oh, okay.
I looked up at my phone, and I was like, it was later than I wanted to be set up. But it wasn't till probably, I don't know, 3:30 or so that I still hadn't seen anything at that point. And I'm looking back in the timber, and I see like a flicker of a tail, like 100%, a deer's tail. And I figured it was going to be the usual train of does coming out first. And I'm sitting there watching, and few seconds later, I see this thing's rack turn in the woods, and I'm like, the first deer of the night, which shocked me. So I don't know what the deal was, because even throughout the course of a 3-hour hunt, like, I didn't end up seeing a ton of deer. Really, this was about the only one. I had one basically snort in my ear at one point, but I don't know what it was, and I wasn't gonna look.
Well,
Yeah.
you were probably so fixated on him too that stuff was moving
There's
deeper
potential.
behind you. You probably
Yeah.
didn't pay a lick of attention to it.
Yeah. So I watch him standing where I originally saw him, and he probably stands there for 25 minutes or so and didn't really do anything. Occasionally you'd see his rack turn or whatever. I really, there was so much junk between me and him that I couldn't even tell how his body was positioned.
Is there a bunch of like grapevines and stuff in this woods?
There is. Yeah. Yep.
And it was
Especially-
timbered. Was it?
I want to say 6 years ago.
So
5,
there's
6
all
years
kinds
ago.
of junk in there.
Yeah, and for whatever reason, the last year's storm, we had that real big storm, and then apparently there was a big windstorm this year. It's brought down a bunch of extra stuff. So yeah, generally a lot of deer bed in this small wood block. Yeah, so he stands there for a while and ends up taking 10 or 15 steps and stops there. And this is basically what he did all night long. Was he'd take a few steps, maybe cover 5 or so yards, and stop and just stare. And I was listening to a different podcast recently, and people were talking about a particular deer that was just real meticulous. And I'm like, this must be what they were describing, like just real methodical and thought out about its next steps. And I'm like, gosh, this is slow going. This is not real exciting. And I don't know if it was a good thing or a bad thing, but I felt like it gave me time to like really
Settle yourself down.
settle
calm your
myself
nerves.
down and figure out, how is this going to play
Were you
out.
trying to watch his body or his rack?
I was trying to watch, just what he was going to do, because, I mean, he's still far enough away. I probably spotted him maybe 90 yards in the timber. Like, there's a lot of different ways he can go at this point.
I've heard people say before that, like, when they spot one, they try to just like forget about the rack. They know it's one they want to shoot and watch the body. And I've thought about like deer in the past. And it's like, I just watch both. I mean, I don't know. I'm doing both. I'm like, God, that's a nice deer. Okay, what's he doing? Okay, God, look at his rack. Jeez, okay, all right.
If a
yeah.
deer's at like 100 yards, you can't see the difference between the rack. Your eyes can't focus that
You're
way.
seeing a
both.
deer.
Yeah.
You're just looking
They've
at
got
the
to be
deer.
at like 15 yards
Yeah.
in order for you to see the body and not the antlers.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So he ends up, covering, a few short yards, stands there for probably another 25 minutes, just stands looking around. And most of the time, he's not even turning his head. Occasionally he would, but for the most part, just fixated on nothing. And covers a few more yards, does it again. And at one point, he's back in the timber at probably 60 yards. And I'm at this point ranging as many different things as I can. And I'm concerned about the cameras, because I figured once he broke to come straight to me, like, I'm not going to be able to mess with these things. So I'm getting them all set up and just trying to run them. Like, that way, if he breaks, I don't need to worry about him. And finally, after probably an hour and a half of watching him,
He's covered how much distance at this time?
40 yards maybe.
That's so crazy, man.
Yeah. He goes on a long run. I mean, just a real tear here, and he covers probably 30 yards, comes 60 yards to 30 yards, and he kind of cuts angles back at me, because at one point in the timber, he went past me and then made his way back. And he's at 30 yards now, but just behind enough brush. And just to his left, there's basically my only hole back in the woods. And he's facing opposite. He has his butt towards that opening.
So he's already past that opening.
He was coming straight at it, and for whatever reason, then
Just turned.
turned back. And at one point, he even put his head up to a small sapling. He didn't touch it, but almost like he was about to rub it, and just stood there for probably 15 minutes and just stared at it. And it was real. But at no point did I ever get like the inclination that he was sick, or, normally like these CWD videos or these EHD videos, like you can tell, like, man, that thing is messed up.
They're like erratic, walking in circles,
Sure.
doing weird stuff.
Yeah, at
he's
no
acting like a
point.
deer,
He
just
was
real slow.
Yeah, he was acting 100% like a deer. At one point, from where he probably was bedded and got wet, he shook off, and it was super cool. You could hear him shake off, get the rain off of him. And Yeah, he shook his head off and everything. So he's standing there at 30 yards, and that was probably one of the longer just periods of just nothing. He just stood there. And I had my D-loop, or my release hooked up to my D-loop for probably over 2 hours. And I'm just holding the bow like this in front of me, just waiting. And I didn't know. I mean, I was really beginning to wonder if it was going to happen because I remember when I first saw him, it was early. I was like, dude, I'm about to kill this thing stupid early. And then by the time I shot, it was getting dark because it was a real overcast day. So I had probably...
It was like the same time you shot yours, like right at
5:08 when I 5:08 roughly when I shot. So I had like 25 minutes of legal left, but it felt dark.
It gets dark fast too when it's overcast like that.
Yeah, yep, and that's exactly what it was. So he stood there forever, and when he was at 30 yards, that's when a deer. I never heard it because the corn stalks were real wet. A deer came in behind me at one point and like sneezed or snorted. It wasn't like blowing at me or anything. It just like kind of huffed under its breath. And normally that's the point in which everything blows up. So I'm like, well, that's it for sure. That's it. And I don't move. Like I'm so bad about just wanting to see. I'll just turn around and like, yeah, what's back there?
Could be a 200. You just
exactly.
gotta
Yeah.
look.
Yeah. So I didn't move and I just waited and I never heard anything come or go. But it left at some point, and I don't know why. So finally, I'm waiting and waiting and waiting, and I look down, and my main camera angle says battery exhausted. And I'm like, because it's about to happen at this point. I felt like it was. And something worth mentioning is every time he would move, he'd basically, it was almost like he was like when your dad at Thanksgiving like starts dozing off, and then he like wakes himself up, and he's like, oh, crap. It was basically like that. He'd be like standing there in a trance and then just do like a real little like under his breath and like kind of like come back to life. And then he'd walk. And he did that almost every time he would move. And he did that at one point while he was standing at 30 yards. And I'm like, my heart starts racing at that point. I'm like, here we go. And he didn't do anything.
That scare you at all? That would probably have scared me.
A little bit. Yeah, it was so quiet. It was just like real kind of eerie that night.
And you can't, it's not like you could have predicted that. It's not like it's the rut, like he's running does, and so you anticipate that sound.
Yeah.
That would have jumped.
That's cool though. My heart just started racing thinking about that. Just like
I can do it again.
do it.
Yeah, so finally he does it and legitimately does a 180 and comes straight to that hole. So I draw back. I didn't have time to start my GoPro, or I wasn't able to start my GoPro because he's standing right there, and it just wasn't worth the risk at that point.
Self-filming that's a whole different ballgame.
It's tough, and I was counting on that main angle running. I charged the thing to 100% that day, and so I did not anticipate it just dying off, but the cold weather seems to just
It does
really have an impact on them. So keep in mind this opening that I have is pretty small. Plenty enough for a safe shot, but not a lot of time. So I draw back, and for whatever reason, it really wasn't even intentional, but I didn't stop him. And he's walking from right to left, and at a slight 1/4-2, and as he's going through there, I squeeze it off, and he's still walking. So it hits probably 3 inches further back than where I intended for it to be.
Just like what happened with my buck.
Yep, perfectly up and down. I knew, I mean, just like you kind of have to remember, like based on your gut instinct, like I remember knowing, like for sure guts. At the worst, it's for sure guts. And he doesn't like kick or anything. He just kind of runs a little bit, probably 10 yards the same way he was headed, and stops. And so my first shot was to the right side of my tree. And at this point, he has now went far enough to the left that I was going to shoot him on the left side of the tree, just swing. And that's probably a better shot for a right-handed hunter anyhow. But there's so much junk there that it was not possible. And he just stops and he's looking back, like real weird. And I reach down, rip an arrow out of my quiver, which is hanging on a little bow hook.
You there's no way to describe like panic mode other than a bow hunter reaching for another arrow in a time where you just like need one.
Yeah, part of me is like,
it's just sheer chaos.
Yeah, I'm salivating over the potential to get a second shot in this deer, because I'm like, I mean, even if, the worst case scenario is that I hit him in the guts, like if I can get 2 shots in him,
Absolutely.
that's a dead deer.
I really think, because I've had several occasions over the last 3 years where that's been something that I've needed to execute. And it just doesn't work if it's not on your bow. So I really think I'm just going to leave my quiver attached to my bow so it's right there all the time.
Yeah.
And even if the weight does, I mean, you can correct for that.
Well, if you practice with it,
that's what I'm going to start doing, because that is the worst feeling, is the panic of trying to get an arrow out of a quiver.
I'm ripping this because I'm holding my bow. I never hung it up. I'm holding my bow and I'm just yanking at this arrow.
One hand, that's tough to do. Those quivers are designed to hold those things tight.
Yeah. Yep. So I get the arrow out, get it knocked, and the deer's still standing there. I'm like, I've never thought myself to be the person to ever get an opportunity to shoot a deer twice.
Is he looking back like your direction or back like where he ran from?
Back, probably more in my direction, but I don't know necessarily if he thought, there's a threat there.
Yeah.
So I looked to the left of the tree, and there's no potential for an opportunity there. But this is where that stick comes into play, because that stick's to my right, and I'm now able to knock that arrow, step out onto that stick, and swing all the way around the backside of that tree. And from there, I could get real low and held on him, and I shot. And I remember hearing something, but then I remember distinctly hearing sticks. And I couldn't, when I talked to you afterwards, I was like, I don't know. Like, I know that second shot I thought hit him, but then I remember sticks. And I don't remember if I heard the shot, something hit, then sticks, or sticks, then. So I couldn't figure it out in my head. But he's still standing there.
So crazy, dude. So crazy.
I'm in the meantime, like, my tree arm is in my gut, basically. So I have to suck my gut in, swing all the way back around, grab that arrow, knock it, suck it back in, get all the way back around my tree arm.
Did he even move at all?
No.
After that second shot?
Not after the second shot, nope. So draw back again, whatever, shoot, and full disclosure, I thought I hit him in the white area that we were talking about earlier. But I knew I hit him that third shot. And at this point, he takes a few steps behind some brush to where even if I would have had a fourth arrow, which I did not.
I was just saying, at this point, I'm out of arrows.
I'm out of arrows, yeah. And it looks like a little light up disco party down there.
Are you thinking about like getting your knife and hucking it, or
like a little throwing knife or something? Yeah, so he's standing there still. And at this point, like, all I can do is watch.
From the first shot to now, how far has he gone?
10 yards.
That's absurd.
Yeah, 10 yards. So I had my binos, and they're down in my pack, but I can see them, but I have to move quite a bit to get to them. So I slowly, and it's really getting dark, probably, pushing 5:15 at this point, but it's just a really gloomy day. Grab the binos, and I'm looking down there at him, and I actually filmed a little clip on my phone. He's just standing there, like, not acting like a gut shot deer even. And I knew for sure that first shot had to have gotten guts. He's not hunched up. He's not doing anything.
Well, there isn't really like a no man's land back there.
No.
It's all bunched up in that rear cavity.
Yeah. So he's just chilling. And I'm looking at him through my binos, and it's almost like he's licking his wound. He's just like turned around licking it. I mean, cool as a cucumber. So then finally, as it's getting, probably 5:25-ish, almost last legal, he takes a few steps behind some thicker brush to where I can't see anymore. And that's when I called you from the tree. And what did I say?
I shot him in the guts. I was like, because again, I was still at that time pretty sick. And I was like, what? He's like, yeah, I got an arrow in him. Or you're like, I shot him 3 times or something.
Yeah, I think I said I shot him 3 times.
I was sitting there going like, don't you have your bow? So at that time, I'm thinking like, okay, if you shoot a deer 3 times, like, you have a gun, right?
You'd think,
I have my bow. I was sitting there, hold on, dude, what's going on?
Yeah, I'm freaking out at this point because I'm like, what just happened? Why is this deer acting this way? Like, now I'm starting to like, okay, I just shot him 3 times or shot at him 3 times. He took 3 hours to get to me from 90 yards. Like, what is happening? This goes against everything I know about deer hunting.
And I want to say too, I was kind of laughing as I was saying that, just hindsight, but Easton was very concerned in his voice, like, dude, shot him in the guts. Like, obviously not the way you want to do it, but it happens.
This
and
is a deer straight out of The Walking Dead.
like such a weird situation that none of us have ever seen. Like, what's going on? Which is funny because I think we had said too earlier in the week, it's always funny how God just like humbles you or like just teaches you a lesson or whatever. We were talking about like how some of these people just have some of these like insane encounters and opportunities. Actually, I think it was after our situation. We were like, how does that happen?
Yeah.
And you were like, dude, I like nothing like that ever happens to me.
Yeah.
And then it's like something crazy happens.
A few days later, like I would have never thought I'd get 3 shots with a bow off on a deer.
At 30 yards, maybe at 15 yards, and then again at 45 yards.
Sure.
And then if you're lucky at 70.
Yeah.
And it's worth mentioning the second 2 shots. Like at that point, I had an arrow in the deer. First arrow straight through the deer's cavity. So at that point, not taking ideal first shots, but you've already hit the deer. Like if you have the opportunity to continue to shoot it, absolutely continue to shoot it. So the shots 2 and 3 were not through brush, but there was just a couple limbs in the way or whatever. But for the most part, I could get through them.
Yeah, if you have the chance to, absolutely knock the arrow and get what you can get in him.
Yeah.
Which I think we're obviously going to get to down the road, but your shot ended up being a little better than you thought.
Correct. Yeah.
So we'll get there, but for anybody listening now.
Yep. So talking to you, we kind of game planned a little bit, like probably should obviously back out. Like that was a no-brainer, but give it some time before I even try to climb down from the tree. So what I did, I stayed in the tree for
all night.
So I should mention this.
I had an all-day sit. Easton had an all-night sit.
No joke. My first thought was that I was going to have to spend the night in the tree. And I was completely okay with it. Like people, I will do insane stuff, especially for this deer. Like I knew I shot a good deer. So I was thinking like, what do I have in my pack that I can use to get through the night? Because it really wasn't that cold. But I'm like, okay.
No, but that's a long time to
I
sit
could do
out
it,
there.
though.
I told Easton, me and you would go out there at like 3 a.m. and be at the base of his tree, be like, Easton, come down. You don't have to be out here anymore.
He's laying dead right there. Like, no,
you're being dramatic.
I had a fingerless glove on my left hand, but I don't like to have anything on my release hand. So I'm like, okay, I know I have my right glove for my release hand in the pack. So I'm like, I can keep my right hand warm throughout the night. I didn't have my heavy gear on. I had relatively light gear on. And I was like, I can probably make it work. But then talking to him, he's like, probably give it some time, try to slip out of there. Cause last I saw him and when it got dark, he's 35 yards. So it was probably close to an hour after legal. I finally decided I'm probably good to climb down. I listened real intently. Didn't really hear anything worth noting. And there were some deer at this point out in the corn behind me. But it was, what was that?
I was going to add in there just that we had talked about with your deer, like the lengths that will go and the measures that will take post shot. You left everything in your tree, correct?
Yeah.
Bow, GoPro.
Only thing I took was my main camera in case it decided to rain that night. I took it off the tree arm and stuffed it in my pocket.
To even eliminate any chance of an extra snap of a whatever or zip of your zipper or anything, like sometimes you got to go to those extremes. So
yeah. So the does are out behind me, and I can reach my truck with my key fob from right there. So I beeped the horn a couple times. I'm like thinking maybe how can I get these deer off the field?
Which that's some reach. It's not, how far is that? That's a
couple hundred yards.
That's impressive.
Yeah, I got reach. And so finally what ended up working though, because that didn't work, I remote started the truck. And when the engine revved, those deer naturally they didn't spook or anything, but they just real quietly slipped off the field.
Man, we're going to have to get rid of that stuff because it's aiding in the hunt.
Yeah.
We can't have that anymore.
Yeah, get rid of that remote technology. So, that ended up working. The deer slip off the field. I was ready at that point. I tied my bow to my tree arm. That way, if for some reason a monsoon came through or something, it didn't blow. Yeah, a raccoon decided to steal the bow. And as quietly as possible, slipped out of that tree. Didn't go over to my arrows, just went straight out the backside of the tree, up through the cornfield, and out of there. Yeah, and that's when I think I talked to you maybe afterwards.
Yeah, you called me all upset.
Yeah.
All in a tizzy.
Yeah.
What do we do? So we reconvene at the house here, and it's always fun to talk about like what should we do, or like what do we got, like, but you knew exactly what you were doing. It was fun to talk about what should we do or how should we approach this. You already knew what was going down, and it was sleepless night. Probably stay here or close. Get out there, crack of dawn, check the arrow out, and then devise our plan from there.
Yeah, which
we did pull a video up too, because Easton was like, "He's a nice deer. He's a nice deer." Like you didn't. It's almost like you don't want to jinx it, or like,
yeah,
he might be dead. I was like so confident based on what he told me. Like, dude, we're finding this.
I was
deer.
getting flustered every time it even came up next. Like, yeah, when we find him tomorrow, or when we find him, and I'm like, oh.
It's like you don't want to be overconfident as the person that did it. I was trying to be that force for you, but he pulled up the video, and I was like, dude. This thing's a freaking giant.
I didn't want the expectation to be high, but I was like, yeah, it's a nice buck. Actually, I texted my wife and I told her I had shot one. And she's like, is it nice or is it big or something? I sent back IDK. And she's like, I know you better than that. Like, you know exactly what you shot. Like, you wouldn't just shoot a buck that you didn't know. And I just sent back, he was big.
Like there's that point in that clip where he does something with his head, and it just turns, and it's just like,
yeah,
stupid.
Yeah,
when they do go from that profile to where you can see the frame, that's when they look the biggest.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah, and we knew what we were gonna do, but like at that point, you're mentally just like not in a good place. Like, I need somebody to be my voice of reason. As far as like, nope, we're good. Like, this is what we're gonna do.
It's always nice to voice of reason, or like confirm. Like, this is what I was thinking. Yeah, you're spot on. Like, I'll do it too. Because like in a time like that, you're right. You're thinking about so many things, and just like you just want to make sure you're on the right track. So.
There have been a lot of times in the past where on different deer that we've killed, we can, in the moment, be like kind of unsure about the shot and go back and reference the video to give us additional intel. But even if you're filming, sometimes just stuff goes wrong and you don't have that. So all the more important to try to build that mental picture in your head so that you do have at least the recreation of the event in your head to go off of. That was huge in my situation.
Yep.
It's got to be huge in your situation too.
Yeah. Yeah. So the game plan from there was I was going to meet you at 5:45 the next morning.
Yep. You texted me at like 5.
I was going to say.
I was already up because I was coughing my head off still. You were like, you
Nick
up?
didn't sleep for like 3 days.
Yeah. You up? I said, yep, come on over.
I'll give you a hug.
He was in the driveway.
I did not
When he
sleep
texted
at
you?
all. So finally, it was 5. I just got up, threw my clothes on, whatever, and drove over here. And we were pretty much to the property way before daylight, which is worth mentioning. That was partially due in part to the fact that I was terrified of the drones. Not kidding.
Because you already had an encounter with one. Out there.
The direction that I saw this deer going was towards the property where the drones were that previous Wednesday. So I'm thinking, okay, if these guys are just taking drones up, I don't know what they're doing with them. And you hear people stealing people's bucks all the time out of people's front yards that are hanging in a tree.
Yep.
So I'm like, I shot this monster, in my opinion. Like, and these dudes are taking drones up. Like, who's to say they won't see this thing in a thermal, image and be like, oh, there's a good one over there. Let's go snag it.
Yeah, you walk a blood trail to a gut pile.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's happened. Maybe not with the drone technology yet, but yeah, that was a concern of mine. So I knew there was going to be guys in there. This is now Saturday morning. So I'm like, everybody's going to be hunting. Like, I'd rather be out there to where if something happened, my presence is there.
There's something to be in, like, you just want to be like close. Mm-hmm. I was with mine last year. It's like I was driving out those roads at like midnight. Just like I just needed to be like close. Like, you're completely out of your hands, but like you just feel better if you're there.
Yeah. Yes.
Well, something that I had thought about, and I think you guys even talked about this that evening. Well, I know I expressed it to you as a concern of mine, was after having watched the footage back, did you have any inclination that this deer might actually be injured of some sort?
I remember telling you I thought for sure he was shot. I thought maybe somebody shot him.
And so with that intel, you told me that, and my first reaction was, if he was shot previously, maybe there is someone out there flying a drone to try to find this deer because they already shot it and can't find it. Mm-hmm. Yeah. That was a super big concern of mine.
And that's where going through, door knocking, like as someone who's tracking a deer, if they physically had to come to my property and door knock and say, hey, we shot a buck, whatever, can we access your property to look for it? You have that means of making that connection. You know who this person is at this point and allow them access to your property. With the drone,
you just fly it up. There is no door knocking because what are you going to do? Tell me to get off your airspace?
Yeah. So at that point, I had shot and killed the deer unknowingly, but had they flown that drone up over the property and seen it laying there, I can confirm, he's got the weird, kicker on his right side or whatever. That's for sure him. And I shot him, earlier in the day. I'm not going to go ask for permission. He's laying 50 yards off the property line.
Well, and like we talked about last week, they can fly the drone and see that there's no people in there. So I'll go get him.
Yeah,
I'll go get him quick. He's right over the fence.
And that's what I was concerned about after we ended up finding him was when we went to go get the sheds and stuff. You
were freaking out.
Freaking out because I'm like, my bow and stuff's laying with the deer, but I'm like, if somebody's just flying a drone out and they're like, there's nobody in that wood lot and I see a nice buck, like, let's run in there and grab it.
There's so many problems with those things, man.
Yeah. Yeah.
So 5:45, you're out there in the morning, ready to roll at that property. The plan is to go in there at first light, try to recover your arrow and gain whatever intel you can from initial shot.
Correct. Yeah.
My plan was to consume as many cough drops as humanly possible to try to not make a scene.
Yeah. Yeah. So we finally, first light comes, whatever, we throw on the orange and walk in there, go to arrow number 1 first, and
walking up to the wood lot, it was like, is that a rave in there? It's just like lights.
Everything's short of music.
Knocked.
Yeah. 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 So we find the first arrow, pick it up for sure, like guts for sure. And it's worth mentioning, overnight, it was like real misty. It never rained, but it was just like a real
damp,
thick. Yeah. So I figured any like individual spots of blood might have not evaporated, but kind of dissipated with the moisture on the leaves. So arrow number 1, for sure guts. We go over, 10 yards, 5 yards, whatever, to arrows number 2 and 3. Arrow number 2 had blown up. And so I figured it hit something. So there was a sapling that was bent over, and I went on the front side of it, and you could see where I had pretty much hit it square. So I knew that arrow did not connect, and then the third arrow had blood on the fletching. I think I have 1 white fletching. That way I can kind of use that to read whatever blood I'm looking at. Had blood on it. There was hair on it, and there was a big tuft of white hair there too. So where he ended up standing there after my third shot for whatever it was, 20 minutes or so, there was 2 big pools of blood right there. And then we probably went, 15 yards?
Probably about,
15 yards, found like one single hair laying on a log, and then maybe another little speck of blood or something. Yeah. But beyond that, there was nothing. So this general direction filters down to a little creek bottom, and so it all goes downhill. So I'm like, there's a logging road. How about we just walk up to there? We'll glance down in here. If he's not laying down there, we know what to do. Back out and call a dog. Especially because those conditions with the moisture in the air, it wasn't like it wasn't a torrential downpour. It wasn't even a rain, really.
That's great for a dog.
That's prime.
Yeah.
Yeah. Everything I've ever heard.
Yeah, it was about as good of conditions for a dog as you could ask for. And if you're listening to this and you've never used a dog, it's important not to stink up the trail with a bunch of people and zigzagging and walking everywhere. So we were pretty diligent, and we kind of just stayed off of the trail he was on and basically followed it and then came right back out the same way. Like we weren't...
You don't want a grid search with the dog.
We weren't crisscrossing, zigzagging. We were trying to be pretty concise with that.
Yeah, because at the point that you're picking up scent on your boots from that deer and you're tracking it across the woods, you're just going to confuse the thing. So we backed out, left, called Jake with the dog, and he said that he would be available to be there early afternoon sometime. So
I guess you should add too. Well, it doesn't really matter. We went to the edge of that ravine and we heard a deer cough.
Yes,
pretty loud. A deer cough down at the bottom. I was like, God, that's got to be him.
Yeah,
it didn't end up being, but at the time we were kind of thinking like, is he down there still alive? Is
you
he in
told
a bed
me that,
coughing?
That's what I thought that's got to be him down in there.
It wasn't, but
yeah. So we called Jake, and he basically said, we described the shot to him, and this is where being able to describe everything that you saw as the hunter is super important, because we've kind of built a reputation with him, or a trust with him, that he knows that what we say is generally very accurate. So we told him, the first arrow was for sure guts. We thought maybe a little further back than what it actually was. So he was thinking it was a potential 12 to 24 hour dead deer for sure, but it could be still alive when we go in there, which then we were concerned about that deer coughing. Do you know what time we ended up getting out there with him?
It was a little before I think he had originally said. Yeah, it was lunchtime, 12:30.
I was cutting up my buck at that time. You guys left the house at like 11:30, so it would have been just afternoon.
Yep. Yeah. So he arrives. We jump out of the truck, kind of go over everything with him, show him the arrow, which he described the first shot as more of like a green gut shot, which he thought was better, being a little more forward, which we knew it was a little more forward than
green would be paunch, not intestine.
Correct. Yeah.
Less digested.
Yeah.
Stomach matter.
Yep. So he equips Doc, gets him all loaded up, and we start heading down through the cornfield. And
suit up is what he kept saying. I thought that was cool.
Suit him
up. It's like, Doc, suit up.
Yep.
That's cool.
Yeah. So we're getting down towards the stand, and he wants to see where the first shot was. So I'm taking him over there, and Doc's got a super long lead. I don't know how long that thing is, but pretty long. And Doc's kind of heading off to the right, and we're getting up towards where the first arrow was. And I'm trying to explain this to Jake, and Jake's kind of watching the dog and trying to listen to me. And he asked me, he's like, is Doc on the line? And I'm like, the line of the deer? And he's like, yeah. And I'm like, no, not at all.
Not even close.
Dog's going this way, and the deer went almost 180, probably 160 degrees the opposite direction. And but the dog's like going to something. And all of a sudden, Jake's like, he's on a deer right there. I'm like, what? So Jake's between me and the dog, and so I kind of step out to the left and head up that direction, and sure enough, you can see this thing's rack sticking up.
This thing.
Yeah, I was gonna say, what side was his right?
I don't remember this deer's rack.
Yeah,
something like that.
Yeah, yep, sticking up over top of a big log.
So 35, 40 yards tops.
I was thinking 45 yards.
45
from the tree, and then he probably did like a 60-yard little rainbow from where I last saw him to where he ended up dying.
Yep. So yeah, you were like,
it was shock, really.
What?
Like, I wasn't shocked that we found the deer. I was shocked that we found the deer where we did and how fast we did.
30 seconds from entering the timber.
Well, it
wasn't.
It wasn't like he was 100 yards further down the trail. The direction you guys thought that he went, that line of sight is not where the dog was pulling. You said the dog was pulling like as soon as he got out of the truck too, right?
Yeah.
That's what I mean. I don't know for sure. I don't know enough about him, but I thought it was interesting from my experience last year. I thought he kind of got out and was just like there, ready to go. With Easton's, he kept he ran like 2 times like down. He just seemed like not misbehaved, but just he was going down to the woods, and Jake would say, Doc, suit up, let's go. And he'd come up and he like ran down again. I was like,
yeah, I don't know if that was more just like
excitement.
Just excitement, like, hey, let's,
because he did say he had been in the house all day. But looking back, I thought maybe, I don't know. Their noses are ridiculous.
Yeah.
So.
But once we got to where the shot was, that put us downwind of that carcass. So that's what it was. This was not a traditional track where he's tracking the scent from that deer, which it's worth mentioning, dogs aren't really tracking the blood, correct?
They're tracking the scent.
They're tracking the scent that is put off by that individual. It's a scent specific to that deer. So the dog never actually tracked the scent of the trail.
He might have picked up the scent and was like, it's over there.
Yeah.
It didn't go that way. It's over there.
We were right downwind of the deer. So the dog basically got downwind and went straight to it, which was sweet.
Yep. And I think Jake initially was like, how did you guys...
You went the wrong way.
Well, we went the right way according to the blood.
Sure.
But we just never, we went and followed the blood till it stopped, and we got the heck out of there. He had looped completely around, so we had no business being up where he ended up being.
Yeah.
Until we backtracked the blood a little bit from where we found him. The loop was pretty apparent. But I was going to add in there too. One other thing about the dog. What was it? Shoot. Now it left my mind. I'll think of it. Keep rolling.
Yeah, I don't know.
There was one other important note I was going to have if you're going to call a dog, and I can't remember now. It
Dog
escaped
being
me.
downwind.
No, I can't remember. I don't know. That's okay. It'll come to me. Go ahead. So you were freaking out. Jake, I think, was like, "What? This was the quickest track job ever." It was like 30 seconds.
He was looking at us like we're crazy. Like you were kind of saying is like,
how did you guys not find
your
this?
tree stand's right there. Yeah, we were going the complete opposite direction. And that's kind of to the point of like, we didn't even try to look over there because we were very conscientious about going in, looking at what we thought, needed to be looked at and getting out. We could have seen him from where we were standing, but never even thought of it. And we would have found that deer had we grid searched, or if it ever came down to grid searching, but it would have been a while before we looked in that particular area.
That would have been the last place we checked.
Yeah.
It'd probably been on the way out.
Closer to the truck than where the tree stand was.
Do you think if you had like additional guys there so that you could be nose to the ground checking for blood, someone else was up scanning
We
the
were
woods?
also in there at gray light. So, and I don't want people to think he was in the wide open. He was in some kind of junky grass, multi-floor rows. So like, unless we were really looking up in there, I don't know if we would have for sure saw him. But I remembered what I was going to say. I was on the edge. I wasn't even videoing when we found it because I was on the edge of the timber texting the neighboring property landowner who we've built, Easton and I have built a relationship with. We had got a hold of her in advance because we knew a dog was coming out there. It's important if you are able to get a hold of the neighboring landowners because a lot of those trackers don't want to stop the dog. So we just had to text her, hey, Easton shot a deer. We're going to be tracking it with a dog. Just wanted to give you a heads up so you're on the same page. And she was like, great, thank you so much. Hope you find it. Yeah, let me know when you start the track job so I can put my dogs in the house. We obviously didn't know if it went onto the property, but we wanted to make sure we crossed our T's and dotted our I's. Yeah. So I was on the field edge texting her when Easton's like, there he is. So I was just going to add, if you're using a dog, if you can, get a hold of the landowners in advance so they don't have to stop him.
Yeah. That's just a good idea in general. If you've got a deer that you need to track and there are neighboring properties where the deer was headed to, before you ever pick up the track job, just get permission.
Absolutely. Yep. They don't want to stop the dog if it has momentum on that track.
Even if you don't have a dog, if it's you don't. The last thing you want to do is track it to a property line and then have to stop to get permission.
Yeah,
do that ahead of time.
Yep. Yeah. So I think probably worth talking about now. We noticed when we walked up to the deer that there was if you cut a softball in half and stuck it between the deer's two bases is essentially what it looked like, right?
I was having trouble looking at it. I was watching Doc just annihilate your deer's hindquarters, but
yeah. I don't remember who pointed it out at first, but somebody's like, good grief. And you could poke it and it was like real just gooey, mushy. You could tell that there was something in there. And we were speculating whether it was, from rubbing trees where they get splinters in there and stuff and it kind of gets infected a little bit, nothing major, or if it was something from fighting. But it was more than I'd ever seen.
Yeah. This seemed odd. It seemed out of the ordinary.
Yep. Which I think that's when we started to consider like, oh, I bet that's, some type of infection that was affecting his brain.
He might have had a fever just like you.
Very well, yeah. Yeah, the way he was acting, who knows, maybe.
Yep. So then fast forward to Sunday, I took him to my taxidermist, and I was excited for that, to figure out what was going on. He was going to go ahead and cape out that face. So we get down there, I show it to him, and he was really, really excited about getting in there with a knife because he knew what that was going to look like and what type of experience that would be. So as he's cutting up to it, like he's like turning his face away because he's expecting this to just come spewing out. It ended up being more like slime, like real stringy. Like you could basically hold it in two hands and just have like this string of slime in between. Neon green color.
That's disgusting.
It was, I never smelled it, and I was like 3 feet away from him, but he was pretty appalled by the smell, which I was cracking up. I never once smelled it, but apparently it was pretty rancid. So finally we're getting down towards where you could see the skull plate or the skull cap, and he thought maybe there was a tine that had went in there, maybe not broke off, but at least from fighting where a tine had punctured the skull. And as we got in there, we started cleaning up some of the goo and flesh. And when he ended up cutting the cap off with his Sawzall, his blade was covered in pus from inside the brain cavity. And sure enough, once we got that off, his whole brain was full of infection, like really, really bad. And we ended up cleaning up the skull cap, and there's a huge fracture right behind his right base. And basically you can see straight through almost. So yeah, it was no wonder why he was acting. I bet.
I mean, it's wider than like a number 2 pencil.
Absolutely.
It's a big hole.
Yeah. Yep. No wonder why he was acting the way he was. Honestly,
He's a warrior.
It's hard to say for sure how long he would have lived, but I don't know that he would have lived much more than a week.
No, I mean, well, who knows when that injury had happened? But I mean, you've gotten cuts on your hand before. It can take a week before that thing gets infected. But once it's infected, it can be like rough in a day.
Well, and the fact that it was in his brain. Actually, it was coming out of his eye. We noticed as he's laying there when we found him, there was pus coming out of his eye. It was actually from the top of his head that came down
Under the skin.
below his eye and then out the eye.
So you had seen that deer the two days previous, and he seemed okay, right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
So
he was just walking out in the cornfield. I saw him the day previous, and then
I don't think an infection like that of that magnitude would happen in a day.
Yeah. No, absolutely not. So I don't know. It's hard telling how long he would have made it, but I feel fortunate that I got to kill him while he was still being a deer.
Yeah.
Like that was super important to me to A, either find him dead already as a deadhead, or B, walk up on him dying and have to put a mercy shot on him would have really sucked.
Yeah.
So I feel like I got to kill him while he was in his last days of being a white-tailed deer.
Yeah, that's super cool. You won't forget that one because of that. And I think, I don't know if we brushed over it or not, but backtracking to when we found him, you ended up smoking the liver.
Yes, yeah.
Center punched the liver with that first shot.
Yep.
So
Yep.
a little bit better shot than you thought it was.
Yep. Straight through the liver, stomach, and then obviously all the rest on the off side would have been a little bit further back. And then the second shot missed. Third shot ended up clipping his inner thigh and put 2 big cuts in his thigh, and then out the front leg, which I thought should have gotten an artery, but it did not appear so because there was no blood, like at all. When we first found him, we actually thought maybe that was why he was acting weird.
Yep.
And somebody asked me, like, was he limping? And I was like, no, he wasn't limping. It turned out that was a broadhead. I mean, that was where I hit him. Yeah, so definitely.
What broadhead were you shooting?
That was a Wacom 4-blade.
Okay.
Yep. Went right through.
You gotta wonder, like, that has to be to crack your skull as a white-tailed deer. Had to be a fight. You wouldn't think that'd be from rubbing a tree. It had to be like I'm picturing like bighorn sheep, just crack. Like
That's what we speculated was, I mean, some serious force to the point where it didn't break off his, well, it could have. He has a few chipped off tines and stuff, but didn't break his actual antler. Literally just broke his skull plate.
dude probably had a headache from another planet.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness.
Yep. Yeah. So I'm trying to think, he has both his brow tines are broke off a couple inches. I had somebody come forward with trail cam photos, which was very awesome of them to do. Got to see him from early season, which I hadn't had pictures till November.
How far away was that?
I don't know. Nope, never.
Kind of one of those you don't want them to ask you, so you don't ask them situations.
Yeah. For the sake of having the information, I was dying to know. Like, I don't care what property you're on, whatever, but like dying to know just sheer distance.
If I know you, you'll figure it out.
But yeah, kind of one of those, like, I don't want to tell you where I'm at, so I'm not going to ask you where he was. And
He had missed him, right?
He had missed him, the second weekend of bow season. Came in and missed him with a crossbow at, I think he said 40 yards. Shot under him at 40 yards and never saw him again. Disappeared after that. So sometime between the second weekend of bow season and December 1st, he was spending some serious time somewhere. Which makes me think maybe he was a couple miles away.
Yeah, he could have been.
Yeah.
Yep.
In that ag country, they can move, especially during the rut. There's no telling how far a deer can go.
And then he went from corn pile to corn pile until he got home.
So, yeah, homecoming bucks. Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
Such a cool
Corn
deer,
piles no more.
Total number of points? Did you count them?
13 scoreable. Yeah, 13 scoreable.
Should we talk at all about the meat?
Yeah, so everybody that was over there noticed that the meat smelled.
I've never reeked. Not like when you gut shoot a deer. Not like that. It smelled bad.
Like sour.
Like just rotten or something.
I don't know how to describe it, but just like not something I'd ever smelled with a deer carcass. So I wanted to save the meat, obviously, and after taking it to the taxidermist, we found the infection, reached out to a butcher friend that we know and texted him and kind of got his thoughts, and he basically said, your nose doesn't lie. Like, don't trust it, especially with the infection. Like, something's not right there. Probably should just let it.
It was probably like septic, wouldn't you think?
Essentially, and that's essentially what kills them, is when the infection gets in their bloodstream or whatever.
Because then their whole body, all their organs, everything is infected.
Yep. Yeah, they eventually just die of being septic. They're infected and not good.
It wasn't like, we left the deer out there for 2 days or whatever. It was cold out. It should have been fine. Like, it wasn't that. It's not like the meat went bad. So it's something to do with what he had going on. But
yep. Yeah, and I trusted that opinion. I felt terrible that night. I loaded him up in the pickup truck, and I was just like, I knew I had to dispose of it, and I felt horrible. So I ended up doing some more research on my own. I think it was Pennsylvania. I don't think it was the Game Commission. There was some type of literature posted talking about infections, particularly in deer, and it said it is not safe to try for human consumption. So I felt better after having 2 different sources say the same thing.
Well, and it's not like you did anything wrong and like, you left it lay outside for a week and now the meat went bad. Like, it's just part of the reality of what we do, and sometimes that happens,
Yep.
So
absolutely.
I would consider this a fluke. I mean, how many people have deer that have broken their skull plates like that and have caused an infection? So
First I've heard of it.
Total fluke.
Yeah. Yeah. Cool part of the story, but
yeah, that's super unique. Everybody that we've talked to about it, it's like, what? Yep. That's wild. So, and it sounds like there may be a next of kin running around out there that looks a lot like this guy. So
I think I know how to kill him.
Yeah, I think so. Make sure he gets in a fight with another deer and let him go.
I wasn't talking about that.
I'm just kidding. Any closing thoughts on either of those?
What did you green score it at?
168 and some change. I told Easton I think I'll probably be within 5 inches, give or take, one way or the other.
One of those 5 inches matter.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. No, I think it'll be pretty close. I bet I'll hit 170.
It's just a sweet deer. There's so much unique qualities to each antler. It's awesome.
Like 26-inch beams, wasn't it?
Yeah. Yeah, 25, 26-inch beams, 21 and some change inside spread.
Legit
double
booner.
Inside points, yeah.
Legit booner. So, pretty freaking cool. I think that's it.
Yeah, that's all I got.
It's going to wrap up episode number 2. We thank you guys for tuning into this one. And if you like what you're hearing and want to like and subscribe, that'd be pretty sweet. We'll have to look into, I wonder how many views our channel gets from, or any channel, but our channel gets from non-subscribers.
I can tell you.
It's probably like 70%.
It's 80%.
Yeah. As I heard, a trapping channel that I follow, he's got like 120,000 followers. He said like 75% of his views are from non-subscribers. That's a really interesting.
I think it's between 60 and 75 or 80 is pretty common for most. There's a lot of people that will Google search and watch YouTube videos but not have a YouTube account, and so that's part of it. But.
So if you like it, hit the thumbs up or the sub button. We greatly appreciate it, and we'll see you guys on the next one. What's cool about having buddies and family? Oh, what happened to it?
It died. I saw a battery exhausted.
How long ago?
30 seconds. That's why I stopped you.
All right, what were we saying?
The exit.
I can't see that screen.
Doesn't that
It's all
bother
right.
you?
Yeah, it's recording.